Okay, signal has been sent. The penguin signal has gone out. That is Death to the Ball Requiem in E minor by One-Eyed Jack and the Shells, now Murder Hornets. Yep, it was updated in 2020 to One-Eyed Shells and the Murder Hornets. All right, we're joined by Let's Go, the HBIC, Matt X, Frank Murr, Thirst for Truth. Let's go. Thank you for ordering that painting. I just started a new series. If you haven't seen him yet, you'll see him soon. And someone already snatched it up, but we'll get to that later. We are raising money for a billboard. I remember noting that this year was already kind of getting these 2017 vibes with regard to this channel and the trajectory we seem to be going. And billboards is one of the things that we were involved in. So we were looking at different ways to make this happen. And I'm thinking, I have a few ideas, but we'll get into that later as well. It's one of the reasons why we're in Discord, to talk about things that aren't about media deconstruction but are relevant to the objectives of this channel. Gorilla says, yo, I'm subbed under a different name, pay a couple dollars to try to keep this unique channel alive. Appreciate it. And if you're a paid member on Patreon or IPS.monster, you basically get the same thing. I have to do double work just to make sure, but I want to ensure that wherever people are coming from, they have the same access and that we're keeping everybody on the same page. The goal isn't to paywall at all. I mean, we're the opposite of a gatekeeping operation. We're here to tear down establishment gatekeeping operations. And I get a lot of flack for it. You know, the chemtrail believers, the militant chemtrail believers are like, leave chemtrails alone. Like that guy, Chris Crocker, crying for Britney Spears, leave Britney alone. They're like, leave my chemtrails alone. I'm like, I'm sorry, it's not as scary as you want it to be. I'm sorry that it's not killing you. I'm sorry that your skyphobia is mere paranoia planted there to make you hate or fear the government. And that you have been tricked into absorbing a right-wing version of climate change. And it's the same premise. And, one person's like, oh, I'm really afraid of those invisible CO2 gases. And the other person's like, yeah, I'm terrified of stratospheric aerosol injections we can't see. And I'm just suggesting here that it's a bifurcated psyop and we can drop it. Because there are chemtrails over Trutherville. That's true. Everywhere else it's condensation. I heard the song Chemtrails Over the Country Club by singer Lana Del Rey. I think she's being ironic, but maybe not. Because it seems like part of the image on that video, because I was watching it, it seemed to be, I don't know, the idea of apathy. Like, oh yeah, we're at this place where we know we're being poisoned, but we're just kind of complicit in it. And it might even be a bigger critique of the West and capitalism and all that. A bit of cultural pessimism to make you feel guilty for your high standard of living. All right, joined by Eileen Dion. Truman B3000 says, just in time for night run, deprogramming, let's go. Ted Striker 2112. Lean Dion says, they spray us like bugs. Crow 777, what a way to live. Yeah, Crow 7 to the 777th power. This guy has been saying for years that you can get rid of chemtrails by boiling vinegar in your backyard. And let's say it's true. Then you can get rid of condensation trails by boiling vinegar because chemtrails don't exist. It's a fascinating take, and I think it's simply a matter of faulty causality. And it's one of the logical fallacies here inherent within chemtrail belief. And one of the reasons why I focus on it is not to be mean to the chemtrail believers. I'm not trying to be mean to the Mandoozled, the Mandela affected either. My interest is deconstructing beliefs that have been shoehorned in through sleight of mind, optical illusions, repetition, etc. And when it comes to the condensation trail thing, there are a number of things that people fall for. They say, for example, it was a clear sky, then the planes came, then it rained, therefore the planes brought the rain. A came before B, therefore A caused B. Not true. And that's just one of many. And these need to be decoded. It's okay to believe it, I suppose, but at least admit that you have no reasonable basis other than a vague suspicion about the powers that be. And it also serves some kind of purpose, I think, of allowing some truthers a tangible evidence of their own oppression and then it justifies their outrage of the people who are just like Lana Del Rey at the country club, unconcerned about the chemtrails above their heads. Echo Charlie says, I want to see the aurora borealis after the total eclipse. Sorry, world ends. I think the world ends, doesn't it, on 4/8? So if you had any plans for after 4/8, it's not gonna happen. At least according to a number of anonymous internet prophets on X, who I've been watching very closely. And they're using multiple gematria calculators and calendars and making really bold proclamations about the meanings of single digit numbers, numbers that are in multiples or maybe even triple digits of the same number, repetitive number strings. These things are all indicators of future calamity. Or it won't end, and they're all going to have to be called out. Like, we cannot let these internet prophets drown our research pool with useless information, irrelevance. And not one has proved their relevance. I've been watching a handful of these individuals, and I think they're feds. Just my opinion. Because if one truly had an inside scoop to the end of the world in today's day and age, on social media where they're obviously hungry for clicks with this engagement baiting, they would get out in front of it and say, I know the world ends on this day, pay me. But instead, they're hiding cryptically. And I'm thinking it's because they're never right. And they've been wrong about everything so far. We all were waiting, according to their predictions, for the, what was it going to be? Aliens or a mushroom cloud over the Super Bowl didn't happen. Well, anyway, the next big date is the 8th. P. Trippa says the eclipse will be 92% visible here in Boston. Anyone ever do the dive into the real origins of the eclipse predictions, even if space doesn't exist? Well, I know the first total eclipse was predicted in 585 BC by Thales of Maltese, whatever, this supposed flat earther ancient sage came out and he said there would be a total eclipse. But he believed that we were on a plane floating on water. He didn't have a concept of, Copernicus or a ball earth or anything. And in many ways, I kind of think that character has been recycled as Tesla. So let me just go ahead and compare the two. Because if you look at, again, Tales of Miletus, he is a scientist, mathematician, one of the seven sages, and he predicted an eclipse. That's one of the things he's known for. I think he's credited with "Know Thyself." So no, that wasn't Jesus. Anyway, he is often depicted holding lightning bolts, which makes him look like Tesla, which is something of an anagram for tails. Interesting character here. But yes, he predicted an eclipse, and he was also a flat or a flurfer. Is that what they call them? Although he didn't suggest any boundaries. Maybe he was an infinite planar. Maybe he was just an I don't know. I'm not going to guess. Angle of elevation says the world ended on December 12th, 2012. It's just the Mendoza matrix with competing gods. So everything's been fake since then. I could almost believe that. I know where I was on 12/12/2012. I was listening to Alex Jones, and I know a couple days later specifically, it was all about Sandy, and it was all about this MK Ultra mind-controlled assassin. SSRIs in video games caused him to do something terrible, and I believed that at first. Although I thought that could explain it, but obviously he was sent there by the Democrats in order to take our guns. Like, I was just drinking the Kool-Aid there in Alex Jonestown for the longest time, but you didn't have anything else as far as what other conclusions could you arrive at for something so horrific, because we didn't have the basic skepticism of it's all lies and the truthers are simply spinning those lies. They're lie spinners. And they don't even add to the truthiness. They just pull you deeper, deeper into the mud. But has everything been fake since then? Interesting question, because it was that event that really caused this thing. It was a certain Joker smile. And I won't say their name, because this Joker will sue you for $1 trillion. But that Joker smile woke me up to the fakery. That's all it took. It's like a glitch, a crack in the matrix. Little tiny crack in the matrix, looks like a smirk, little duper's delight, but no, that really blew the whole thing's cover. Joined by Salty Siren says, yup. Isabel Ann says, AJ roped us all in, glad he didn't eat us. Oh, yeah. And he specified that when he's sized up his neighbors, specifically his liberals, for cannibalism to feed to his daughters, he specified that he's not going to tell them they're eating human meat. He's going to Soylent Green them. Ted Striker 2112 says the new bird flu is going to be another reason to stay locked down. I don't think the masses will follow. No, I think they've played that card, and I don't know what the rules are as far as the Illuminati goes. But when they have these Illuminati playing cards, I don't think they can play the same card twice in the same 4 year cycle. So I'm suspecting that the next lockdown will be based upon radioactive fallout, just in time to watch Fallout on Amazon. Dinah South says the eclipse in Montana will be at 11:33, but only partial, not full. Now, what is NASA really doing with APEP? Launching these three satanically inspired idols, these obelisks named for some dark serpent god of chaos, and they're going to launch it at the moon. Salty says Bird Box blank incoming. Well, Bird Box was the one with Sandra Bullock with the blindfold, walking her kids around, and they have to wear blindfolds. Because if you see the people without blindfolds, you go crazy, you die. They have to make it to quarantine. And quarantine happens to be a place where the visually impaired have lived, people who cannot contract this. I guess it'd be like a sort of like a mind virus that comes through your eyes. So they were automatically inoculated. But this preceded 2020, and it was all about the fear of the non-masked. If you just think about the mask being lowered from the eyes to the mouth, you can see how it was actually a foreshadowing. Now, that movie, of course, was Fear, Paranoia, and it ended with a quarantine. Predictive programming, again, it doesn't always have to match this everything directly. Like, okay, so in this one, they're covering the eyes. In real life, we did the mouth. In Hot Skulls, they do the ears. You have to wear earplugs so you don't catch the mind viruses that somebody is speaking, what they call jabbering, which is probably a joke related to the anti-jabbers and what they're saying. So it has scenes that we've lived through where someone walks into a grocery store and they're not wearing earphones, no earplugs, and everybody else sees them and they start panicking. And that's because if you hear what they're saying, you'll catch it. And this whole thing is predicated, of course, on mind viruses, which do not exist, or they should not exist. But they actually do exist, but only for people who have been properly conditioned to receive them, meaning their natural mental immunity system, their natural mental immunity has been stripped away. What we call MAIDs. They've created a world of MAIDs patients, and they don't even treat it. They just want to control which viruses that they're going to be absorbing. So they can just download ideas directly into people's minds en masse. Again, remember, Netflix connected to Edward Bernays. Manipulation of the mass mind through perception management, plus their other relative, someone who knew how to tap deep beneath the hood and operate on a subconscious level, Sigmund Freud. Joined by X322X, thank you for joining. But my point being, one movie has ears covered, the other has eyes covered. And in the other movie, the one we lived through, it was mouths. But see, hear, speak no evil, or hear, see, speak no misinformation. Because ultimately, this entire setup was to gain control over information. John Cordone says, have you seen Jupiter Ascending yet? No, I have not. I want to watch it, but right now I'm watching Three Body Problem. And it's very interesting on a number of levels. And I'm thinking maybe after I finish it, we'll give other people time. I don't want to offer spoilers on anything necessarily. Although we do regularly offer spoilers about what's going to happen on the world stage. Armin Ree says, what if the lights in the sky are merely a complex clock and it is time that holds the key? After all, Saturn is the god of time. Fascinating. Well, their whole religious paradigm seems to be, I'd say, pantheistic, animistic even. It's not monotheistic. They don't worship Satan. It's way more complex. But it is certainly true that one of the main deities you would refer to as Saturn, ruler of the dead, cycles of death, reincarnation, and rebirth, specifically time and space, symbolized also by the black cube. Fascinating when you get into the symbology how consistent this is and the meaning of it all. And of course, Saturn, the cycles, and all of this is death as some kind of temporary um, respite, or rather a stopping point before beginning again. And they've brought this back with their way of syncretizing everything. And in this case, they use the symbols of recycling. Like, quite literally, recycling is basically worshiping the god of the earth. Not a coincidence that the three green arrows form a six-pointed star, which is a symbol of Saturn, the earth god. But my point being, even the green, the green god, god of the earth, it's all built into it. But recycling is Gaia worship or earth worship. But anyway, as far as what's up above us, that's all very interesting to me to contemplate. I mean, are we going to see the dog star fall from the sky and it's really just a big satellite and a big stage? May as well be. We all are living in our personal Truman shows. There used to be one big Truman show, and there's several. When I say Truman Show, I mean a closed system of ideas. But the way they've fractured it these days, you can exist in your own reality. It's very much compatible with everybody else's as long as you accept the big lies. And it seems like politics is mainly about splitting people on two sides about all of these quote issues. Meanwhile, they're in complete agreement about the big lies, which define the parameters of the game board itself. That's why I say you can't win in the info war. If you're an info warrior, if you're part of the resistance, you're losing. As they say in war games, strange game, the only winning move is not to play. And that's referencing nuclear warfare, mutually assured destruction, but I apply it to the world stage. It's an alternate reality game. If you don't want to enter their alternate reality game, stay where it's objective, off world stage. Echo Charlie says, I love that there's a 12,000 year cycle, comet cycle coming through. I wonder if resets cycle. Well, one thing that's interesting about this latest reset, because someone had mentioned the world ended in 2012, I would say it ended on December 21st, 2020, with the Saturn Jupiter conjunction on a winter solstice, the so-called Christmas star. We haven't had that alignment on that night since Jesus was born. So if you want to look at this as a reset, year zero, yeah, we'd say 2020. So the world ended and started again, which is very consistent with this thing. And it's really about, I think, the transition into this new age. They call it the age of Aquarius, the age of Horus. There's so many different ways to describe this new age, but it has to do with largely the tearing down of the patriarchy and the elevation of this new goddess. So basically, the canification of the patriarchy, and the Whore of Babylon replaces the previous archetypes, and a few other radical changes, but it largely seems to be based upon this green world order, which isn't really communism and it's not environmentalism. And as I said last night, environmentalists and environmentalism with a capital E, it's really just about internalizing misanthropy and hating humanity itself. But this is the religion again. Environmentalism is all religion of the worshiping the earth god. Nicotrama says, any Google lawsuit update, Tim? Well, it's April 4th, but May 13th is our first hearing, and it's not a trial hearing. It's kind of where we're going to discuss what needs to be brought into evidence and discovery. And I have my plans ready to go out to Redwood, California, but May 13th. The last thing that really happened was there was the typical motion to dismiss, and then they dropped that because I filed an amended complaint, and I really made the case that my main grievance here, and out of all the causes of action, I have half a dozen, and they spent a lot of time refuting these. But it's like, I'm not there for a defamation suit. I'm not there because of trademark infringement. Those are aspects of the cyber stalking campaign. Those are just two of the tactics. I'm only there to get them to acknowledge that their legal team was complicit in the theft of my podcast by a third party who was, according to his own admission in an email that I have, that I've included as evidence, that he was deliberately stealing my content by lying to YouTube's legal department and succeeded, which gave him copyright controls for 5 years. So, anyway, I got Google to admit it, and they said, "We don't represent him. We are victims as much as you are." So, we're all on agreement that a crime has been committed. And this is a serious, felonious cybercrime. This is a big deal. So, in other words, my intention is on May 13th is to uh, request the court obtain all of these emails, the full exchanges, not just what he sent me. And since I'm also suing Google, I'll be requesting that we get other emails relevant to the case, usually specifically the criminal admissions. And that's what we're talking about. Somebody admitting to committing crimes because he thought he was sending it to somebody that he knew. He sent it to me by accident. Or rather, I'd say phishing, social engineering. But my point being, I'm not sure where it's going to go. If I can get a court case, a court date, I can get everything in discovery. I think it's not a matter of winning. It's just a matter of demonstrating, who's really responsible here and what is Google's responsibility. And did the attorney, and we'll have YouTube legal department's email address. Um, we'll find out who exactly was there that day. Um, did they inadvertently fall into this trap, or was it somebody working with Goldfinch? Was there a conspiracy against the IPS? We intend to find out, but that's the update for now. I mean, I have some other updates sort of related to it. There's a number of people, far left types, on Biden's side who are looking very, very closely into George News's connection to Marco Polo. Because if I'm right, and I am, and they think I might be, but they're looking, they will be able to prove that Garrett Ziegler had contracted a hacker, which makes this case not about defamation but about hacking, which would be a disaster for them. So that's what we're aiming for. Angle of Elevation says in Blade Runner 2049 it appears the whore of Babylon worship appears to have fallen because they had like a 100-foot statues of naked women crumbling in Vegas replaced by AI. Interesting. It's a very common theme. In fact, I was watching The 100 on Netflix, and in that series, humanity has been destroyed to save Gaia because we're polluters. And the AI that took over is actually called Ellie, and it's a woman in red, scarlet woman. It's that same archetype. It's always the scarlet, but she decided to pull the plug on us because we're so bad for the environment. So what they did is they put a bunch of babies into an ark and sent them into space while the Earth healed. Every one of these movies begins with that premise. That's why I mean, if you're an environmentalist, you would have to have necessarily internalized a lot of self-hatred for your own species. All right, let's continue. I have a lot of notes here on my minds.com/infinite plane society. It's unreal, Otero said. So that article about space junk hitting someone's house I mentioned the other day, well, that story has spread, and then here we have an example of the Washington Post where they're saying a piece of metal tore through his roof. Was it junk from the space station? But listen to what the person who nearly died said, quote, "It's unreal." So if you just believe the news as a media literalist, are they telling us it's not real? Or does it seem unreal? Is it unreal or does it seem unreal? See, he specifically said it's unreal. Like, are they telling the truth on purpose or by accident? NASA spokesperson Josh Finch said the agency is analyzing the object at Florida's Kennedy Space Center to determine its origin. If it did come from the ISS, he may have been a victim of astronomically bad luck. Would they have made that astronomically bad joke if he had died? Like, let's say the piece of metal had crushed his skull when he's like bicycling. Astronomically bad luck, you got hit by space junk. Anyway, that's NASA. It's all just bad jokes. Crane collapse, deadly downtown disaster. On a Thursday afternoon in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, a crane collapsed. One dead, two injured. Fell on a bridge. Now I saw this, I saw a bridge, I saw a crane, and I thought this is throwing up all kinds of metascript key terms and images. So another bridge, more craziness, and of course the last bridge we were talking about had a very interesting crane being brought over to repair it. But yes, a crane fell, fake until proven real, with extraordinary claims. Depends on the reportage, the fakeability, and all of that. So, looking at something like this, I'm inclined to think it's real, but it does throw up a few flags. Doesn't mean it's not possibly staged. We shall see. But look at the answers here, the responses. These are so darn programmed. White House press Anthony Hughes, he says, the infrastructure around America is crumbling. If only the funds used for DEI were instead used to make America safe. Of course, DEI and die. Seeing this with an influencer, someone from the White House press, I immediately think that this is a hoax. Next two person says train wreck cluster, airplane problem cluster, now the bridges. What's going to happen during the eclipse? Power grids? You know, that reminds me. The movie Leave the World Behind has a soundtrack that actually underscores everything about the movie. And there's an opening track where the music video has a blackout. It actually has the singer shutting down the power. And Nulfo says vegans will save Gaia. Well, what I think is ultimately going to happen here is they're going to turn this place into a human zoo with everybody concentrated into little bubbles, enclosed cities, where you have to pay taxes on the air that you breathe. You know, I've been suggesting they're going to rate limit you on how many steps you take per day. It might have to do with how much O2 you need, but I think that's certainly the case, and they'll rewild the rest of the world. Animals will roam free. Humans will be captive. It will be a zoo, sort of an inverse zoo for humans, where the zookeepers are the power elite who brainwashed everybody into accepting this form of neo-feudalism, but it's more like Brave New World because unlike feudalism, you don't have to do any work. It's like Wall-E. You just have to stare at the screen and consume whatever is in that slushy. And if you look at Wall-E's subtext, it could be their own dead, just something that has been brought up before. Lean Dion says, most recent season of Simpsons, there's a joke about Elon Musk's rocket crashing into the ISS, destroying it. You know, one of the storylines I had kind of put down in my notes was that the dragon, you know how in the Bible it's the dragon and its tail drags down a third of the stars? I kind of thought, you know, that would be interesting if Elon Musk's dragon somehow wrecked the ISS and it pulls down 42,000 CubeSats and it would look like a third of the stars falling. The Simpsons may have dropped another prediction. The world may end one day. Let's see what we have here. I think this is the one. Yeah, The Simpsons just predicted that the International Space Station would be destroyed by one of Elon's spaceships. Okay, this one escaped me. This was from back in October. Fascinating. I'll go ahead and retweet that if you follow me on IPS Insider. Lean Dion says lockdowns worked. You know, a huge part of the lockdowns was, I think it was habituating people to hooking themselves up to the screen and getting more screen time than meetverse time. So metaverse trumps meetverse, and that habit is a big part of the trap. I don't like the movie Leave the World Behind. I mean, we reference it because it's the main frame of reference for how the world's ending right now. And I mention often that the main character, one of the main characters, goes to the bunker and watches TV as the world ends. And the title of the movie is an anagram for Behold the End War Live. And I think that really speaks to how it's all going to be televised, that you're not going to experience it personally on any level. Buzz Dean says 44 people watching helped him out by giving him a thumbs up. Appreciate that. We have 30 listening on Twitter, 4 on DLive, 13 on the backup, 44 on the main. We have 3 on Twitch, about 20 on Odyssey, and uh, between 30 and 40 right now scattered between Paranormal Radio and RadioNet. So we have a good number listening, but we're scattered. And so if any of you aren't on the chats and you want to be in the chats, go to ips.monster, join, and all the chats are integrated. And what we're doing here is it's not just a random chat. Not that everybody knows each other here, although many have been here for some time, but this chat represents a raft, is what you call it, when a lot of, penguins, when they gather on the water. It's not a flock, it's a raft, and it maintains this solid. And we are discussing this sea of irrelevance where no one can gain a coherent grasp of reality because the world stage isn't rooted in objective reality. It just isn't. And this raft is. And the continuity here of this chat room is the main feature. The continuity of people not caught up in the sea of irrelevance, lost in reality fluidity. Shannon Jones, I'm late. Thanks, Tim. Thank you for joining. Yeah, and also if you sign up at the newsletter ips.monster, you also get the archive sent to your inbox, which now have transcripts. They all have transcripts. Here for now says, what a strange adventure this place is. I love it. Yeah, it is really intriguing. Like I'm not scared. I'm not a doomer. I'm not suggesting the world's going to end in 4 days or any of that stuff. I don't really subscribe to any of the cultural pessimism. If anything, I think this is just something of a puzzle in a way. But I think it's bigger than just fake news. But that's the surface level. Peace 360 says, too bad Twitch doesn't have a thumbs up. Copaesthetic says, nuke radiation contamination and climate lockdowns are the same. They're getting both these ideas out there. Yeah, that was my occupational specialty, the first one in the Army. It was nuclear, biological, chemical. And the full purpose of this MOS is for decontamination. And the decontamination procedures for nuclear, chemical, and biological are fundamentally the same. Although, and with biological, we lived through that. Chemical, I think it would be pretty quick to clean it up and it wouldn't be as widespread because we aren't the carriers for that. But the fallout would be, I think, the most devastating because they would blame it on the weather and they would suggest that the wind going this direction will make it necessary for us to stay in. I think they have it all worked out. I recommend watching the Humanity Bureau. This is a 2017 film, Nicolas Cage, dystopian thriller. Every movie is a dystopian movie thriller. They're always starting with that. A set in the year 2030 that sees the world in a permanent state of economic recession, facing serious environmental problems. Now, of course, it's global warming is a big part of it. Unbelievable. Anyway, the point here is that people are locked down and they're not allowed to leave until, well, until it's been decontaminated. And they're told that these lands are highly toxic. It's all radiation. You can't leave your homes. Anyway, the main character, his name is Cross, he gets his hands on a Geiger counter to measure the radiation, and he finds out that no, actually, we're locked down for no reason. Interesting storyline. I mean, totally unbelievable. This would never happen in real life, right? Nicolas Cage, it says, Escape from New America. But I think it's definitely the case that they're not going to be able to redo 2020. They can't play the same Illuminati playing card. And if you look at predictive programming as a predictive model, as advertising what they're going to do, we've been given the story. Oppenheimer. Like, it's pretty clear where this is going. Godzilla. Godzilla X, King Kong, and unlike the previous lockdowns, I think these ones won't be so by split where one side is protesting because Fallout is way more dangerous and far more believable. People will be inside watching Fallout on Amazon. Okay, let's get back here. We talked about the crane collapse. Roseanne, uh, making more and more sense as time goes along. This is insane. I don't know if these comedians are being paid to do this, but they're Kool-Aid all the way. She's at some event, and I think she's gone full blown. Yeah, I have a thing about it here. Roseanne goes full QAnon and deranged rant about baby blood drinking Democrats. So she's at a party for Carrie Lake, and she's ranting about how the Democrats are drinking babies' blood. She said here, we have to vote our way out of this, and if that doesn't work, 1776. And of course, 1776 means January 6th or something like that. But that's Roseanne Barr. A lot of these comedians who go on to the right, it's big with MMA as well. They get big into Q, and they're the only ones really that are spreading this stuff. I mean, I don't think it's grassroots. Let's see what else we have here. God was bored says Fallout Boy got their band name from an episode of The Simpsons. Yeah, the Fallout has been in the predictive programming for a long time. And I would even suggest that because recently there was who was it who said that Gaza should just get nuked? This was just the other day. Tim Walberg, a Republican congressman, suggested nuking Gaza. And we have this like, actually, I probably have the tape here. Video appears to show GOP congressmen suggesting that they should deal with it like Nagasaki and Hiroshima. Now, back when White Noise came out, I watched this movie. It's about a train derailing in Ohio, which is called the heart of it all. So it's like the heart of America. The train derailment followed by a big mushroom cloud. Internet blackout, power outages, and a toxic airborne event, and everyone has to evacuate. Anyway, White Noise. Immediately after, you have a train derailment in Ohio and a toxic airborne event with the mushroom cloud, just like the Netflix. And the mainstream media said it's an eerie coincidence. And what was even more eerily coincidental about it is that many of the extras from the movie had to be evacuated when the train derailment happened there in East Palestine, Ohio. So at that time, we were listening to a lot of apocalyptic rhetoric from Donald Trump. He kicked off his campaign in Waco, and this was the night after Netflix released Waco American Apocalypse. And he said, this is our final battle. So you got final battle, apocalypse, Waco. Waco, where Jesus Christ to many, but Dave Koresh, age 33, was burned to death. This whole Burning Man thing, incinerated, a martyr. And that is the event that radicalized Alex Jones and Timothy McVeigh. So just looking at this picture, apocalyptic rhetoric, all this kind of this buildup, it just seems, and I think we all have been following this buildup, and it just seems like they have been leading us to this point where people are expecting something. I think it's going to come anyway from the right when they finally end up dropping it. Just pointing out though, this apocalyptic doomsday stuff has been building for some time, starting with really with Waco. That's kind of where I'm following this thing. But that even highlights something else I was going to bring up. Waco, 1.6 million rounds was the basis for the raid by the ATF. 1.6 has been sort of a code leading up, of course, to January 6th. The storming of the Capitol, the 1776 that Alex Jones said would come back if they try to take the guns. He went on Piers Morgan and he said 1776 will commence. And that was a reference to 1.6 billion hollow point rounds. So the 1.6 stuff has just been insane. It's been repetitive. And when I say repetitive and repetition is like the main feature here when it comes to predictive programming, it's because that's how advertising works. We're looking at an advertising campaign for the future that they're rolling out on the news. I want to open up my phones here really quick if anybody has anything to add before we get too deep into the weeds here. But I'm just like looking at this Palestine toxic airborne event, and then this guy's like, let's nuke Gaza. I'm like, wait a minute here. And then if you think about how the significance of Ohio being the heart of it all could relate to Israel, we're talking heart of a nation or something like that along these lines. I'm just suggesting that white noise, East Palestine, may be predictive programming for where they finally do the nuke. And is it going to be out there in the Middle East? Is it going to be in Seattle? Not sure. There could be multiples. Yeah, copacetic remarks that the key bridge was 1.6 miles long. 1.6 is a big code, as is 116. We've discussed this endlessly. The permutations of 911, the external threat, flip it upside down. 611 is the internal domestic threat, the execution date of then 33-year-old Timothy McVeigh. But the bridge falling narrative, of course, connects with the 1619 with Leave the World Behind and that bigger narrative, which is 1619 versus 1776. So when Roseanne Barr comes out and she says 1776, that's the right wing's idealized past, and that's their version of America. 1619 is the left's, their version, which is far from idealized. And it's just a dialectic that they have set up on the political horseshoe. And this bridge falling, interestingly enough, is part of what you can see to be a contiguous narrative between Netflix and news, and then what follows after. So they merge reality and fiction. They sew it together, and it's seamless. And this is one of the reasons why people can't tell what's real or fake. And there's quite literally enough leeway for people to just choose their own reality. That's where we're at. And that's how it is with alternate reality games. And that's how it is in insane asylums. And that's kind of where we're at right now as a society. I mean, when it comes to the hyperstitious nature of it all. As long as they convince us that we know more than we've ever known, that we're more enlightened than ever, that scientism is the best religion ever, uh, nobody will recognize that, yeah, we've been lowered into a deeper level of Plato's cave, and it's going to get deeper. I heard they're putting time zones on the moon, so that's going to be in preparation for when we start colonizing the moon. The United States wants to have time zones. Along with Eastern, Central, Mountain, Pacific times, we could have coordinated lunar time. The moon's gravity means a super precise atomic clock would run ever slightly faster. Okay, there you go. Coordinated lunar time, CLT. Yet NASA to decide. Let me pull this up here. NASA is going to decide.
While preparing for Monday's eclipse, NASA has already started working on its next moon project. The White House has asked.
Yeah, here we go. They're going to decide the moon time zone. Fascinating.
Asked them to create the moon's time zone to be called Coordinated Lunar Time, or LTC. The hope here is for it to help with returning humans to the moon. NASA has been given till 2026 to figure out what time it is on the moon, and they'll be helped by the Departments of Commerce, Defense, State, and Transportation.
My thinking on this is they're not going to be able to trick people into believing they're on the moon if they're not on the moon. That's not going to work. I certainly think that there are deep underground Mars bases, deep underground moon bases, essentially military bases cosplaying as planets and moons, which could be populated by actors just like the ISS. We're just talking about movie sets. They don't even have to be deep underground. I mean, they could really just be done in a movie studio. But my point is, I don't think they're going to send millions of people to Mars like Musk says. They might load people up in the Starship and it'll be like a space Titanic. It'll get whacked by a space iceberg, a comet, or it'll hit the ISS. But they're not going to make it to Mars. I think they're going to kill that. But they might be able to convince people that we are going to the moon regularly. So we'll just have another clown show, but it won't be in the ISS, it'll be on the moon bases. And they could even have a few hundred people there, it'll look like. And I think they could fake it pretty convincingly. In fact, I think I've seen something at the bottom of the ISS swimming pool where they have it set up to look like the moon. I'll have to go back into that topic here soon. Echo Charlie says, Loosh is not in the Scrabble dictionary. Scrabble would be a mess if every word on Wiktionary gets in, or Urban Dictionary. There's basically no combination that isn't a word at this point. Loosh, you could argue, should be in the Scrabble dictionary. And loosh, for those who don't know, is a term used to describe one's life energy harvested by, well, I guess, the emotional appeals of others, guilt tripping, fear. It can be extracted through fear, intense focus, worship, adulation. So essentially, anything you give your energy to, and where attention goes, energy flows. Anything you give your attention to could be said to be absorbing your loosh. And nearly every mainstream mediated event is by design, is a loosh magnet. And the purpose is up for debate. What are they doing? Are they feeding it to some entity that writes all the stories behind the scenes? Is that what's going on? Is the demiurge truly in control at the very top of the monolithic media and the single government that rules over all mankind? I mean, they write the stories, they create the scripts and these narratives to make us think that there's all these different groups with competing interests, and no, it's really not like that. It's a planetation. It's Plato's cave. It's remarkable if you think about it. The fact is that we've already been conquered. That's my point. That's why I said earlier, there's no resisting, no purpose in resistance. And I am serious what I said earlier about voting for Kamala Harris or Biden, whoever makes it to that finish line, because I don't believe in voting. I think that voting is taking part in the info war, and I'm a conscientious objector. I'm not going to participate. And the default position for conspiracy theorists or anybody who's seen through the mainstream media, it's going to be to vote for the Republican for the most part, the GOP. And I don't appreciate the idea that I'm lumped in to a voting block for a world stager, a character that I don't even believe in. So not voting isn't enough. If I really want to make my point, I need to vote for the other side. And then all the truthers who get mad and they say, you're voting for Biden, I'll say, oh, so you believe in voting? Because I don't. There's no point in voting if the guy that you're voting for believes in moon landings. Like, we should be past this. Salty says, I'll write Tim in. Angle of Elevation says, Elon Musk said he's going to start selling tickets to Mars for $100,000. Pretty good for a one-way trip. Yes. And he did say if you don't have the money, you can work it off. I mean, he's very comfortable with the idea of indentured servitude, which we could also call, I guess, serfdom, which is the basis for Pope Elon, the moniker we've given him. And I've been thinking too that we need to start putting pressure on some of the gloobers and the glurfs to put their blood where their mouth is. Like, you know what? If you think you're going to Mars, you think you're going to the moon. Because I even heard Fight the Flat Earth. He's like, look, Musk is sending a starship into orbit. We're going to Mars. Take that, flat earthers. That's like, well, they also say that on Mars, they're going to build the base out of astrocrete, where you put your blood into the regolith, you mix it with the Martian dust to create bricks. So I'm thinking a lot of these big mouths should start donating their blood to build their future Martian habitats and really create that blood and soil bond so that when their kids grow up as Martians, they can see that their family really sacrificed everything to be a part of it. It's a real neat story, but like if you really believe it, act like it. Like these people who say the world's going to end. Well, let me borrow your car, and if you don't come back, big deal. They never they never take it to that extreme. Like they don't let you get real with it. Angle of Elevation says, I wonder what the minimum wage is on Mars. No, Mars doesn't have a wage. It's communists. It's going to be a communist base. Look at Red Star, a book from 1908. Russian rocket pioneers were all about space communism. The idea that you perfect the system on Mars and then you sell it to Earth and say, hey, this is the way to live. Iron FE says Mars plus blood plus dirt equals BS. Well, then you don't want to hear about Astrocrete. How astronaut blood could help build a Mars colony. A new study suggests an intriguing possibility on the building front. Hardy bricks can be made by combining lunar Martian dirt with a little blood protein. Let's see what we have here. Yep, it says here getting a foothold on other worlds may require living off the land. Hauling everything from a human outpost would be too expensive and time consuming. You couldn't load up a starship with bricks. So there's a protein found in human blood that they could mix in the mud. So you're looking at biocomposites made from simulated Mars and moon dust along with a common blood protein. Such manufacturing technology could help humanity expand its footprint in other worlds. So I'm just suggesting that a lot of these, what do you call them? The space cadets, these future space cadets, the glurfs, start donating your blood and maybe even have rockets full of blood sent to Mars just in advance. Really insane. This whole thing is just really insane. It's grotesque. But Astrocrete is made from human waste and it's plastic. So if you're on the ISS as a visitor, refuse the plasticware. Just eat with your fingers. You don't want to know. Commenter says, I know there is a globe, but no, because Musk, I don't trust Musk. Well, look, there could be a globe. There could be a globe. Sure. And we might be on it, and it might be spinning at 1,000 miles per hour. Big deal. But that doesn't mean that what they show us in their crappy videos is what it looks like. They put a filter on it. If anything, they're hiding a bunch of land. Yeah, it's not only blood. They can mix blood, sweat, tears, and anything else. Commenter wrote cement. Yeah, yep. Interesting homonym. Now, what is the Mars lunar time zone going to be? You know, this is fascinating that we're even having this conversation. I'm reading a book now called, I think it's called Trial. Let me see if I can pull this up. It's David Weber. Just picked it up yesterday from the library. Oh yeah, Through Fiery Trials. Through Fiery Trials. And it's about this future where mankind has been annihilated by aliens, basically. And every time they build back up, they get wiped out again. And they have these arcs. They rebuild, they get wiped out. And eventually, they realize that what's killing them, what's giving them away before they can advance enough to fight back, is their growing technology. They reach a certain level of technological advancement and they get wiped out. So this new priesthood arises and they say, we're going to keep everybody primitive. So they know the truth, but they replace the stories of aliens with angels and demons, and they put everybody in a very superstitious, fear-based worldview for their own safety. And it's kind of like fascinating because the whole book has this concept it deals with things like time zones or how you maintain the same frame of reference when you're scattered across the universe. You know, I read a bit of science fiction, but another part of this, and I read it because I'm looking at it as predictive programming, the same reason I watch these movies. But it reminds me of one of the aspects of three body problem, where it's confronting this idea that um, the aliens might wipe us out, see us as a threat, etc. Armin Reese says, Tim, we should really break the space hoax in Trutherville. Yeah, I'm surprised that so many truthers are still believers in outer space as presented. I mean, I don't know what it looks like up there. You only know what they say, and you're trusting liars. Unless you believe that the liars don't lie once they cross the Kármán line. And there's an interesting phenomenon of gatekeeping that I see often where even veteran moon landing debunkers think the space station's real. Like, how does that work? They faked it, they faked it, they faked it. Oh, this is real. Well, no, you can't just suddenly have it become real if everything else that preceded it was fake. There's an inconsistency here, and they fill it in with the divine fallacy, appeal to the supernatural. They'll say, "Oh yeah, the moon landings were fake, but the secret space program's real, and it's way more advanced than we know, and it has UFOs." They give you a bunch of BS. But yes, as far as the space hoax in Trutherville, um, to me, it's kind of an interesting point here because you can't. They worship Elon Musk, and he has CubeSats in orbit. And in my opinion, Starlink satellites, the whole Starlink thing, is nothing more than a repackaged Loon X. Loon X was a series of big stratospheric balloons that would be providing internet service anywhere, however remote. They said it wasn't economically viable, and they canceled Loon X. And then SpaceX comes out with Starlink, which does the same thing, only it's from space. So I think too much of their worldview is predicated on the existence of space. If you get rid of low Earth orbit, you get rid of ICBMs, you get rid of Chinese space lasers, you get rid of Jewish space lasers. I don't think Trutherville is ready to step outside of the fake space paradigm. Because what replaces it? We don't have anything to replace it. The flat earthers have glommed onto the biblical view and a domed earth, and I'm suggesting here that no, we're left with, well, because of where we're at as far as the limitations of what we can know, we're left with a bit of agnosticism, shape agnosticism. But it's important to remember that even though we are adopting a position of shape agnosticism because of the limits of what we can know, the people who are faking space know what's really going on. So we can't pretend like it's not known. It's a known, but not to us. And I always saw this whole research flat Earth thing, this billboard campaign we did, and all the noise we made around it, as sort of a way of creating a lot of public pressure to turn the heat up on the agencies to basically put up some convincing evidence or to topple and to flop in everybody's full view now that more people are paying attention. I mean, in my view, the space agency is like a flopping fish. It's pretty much dead, but it almost doesn't matter at this point. Nobody's paying attention. It's like religions come and go, and the concept of God has changed, and they're still standing. And in my view, NASA is a religion. It is, in fact, like Scientology. I call it NASAtology. It's a scammier space religion than Scientology. Better special effects. Scientology has better actors. But these are space religions. And this is your state religion, and they didn't tell you when you were raised in this. This is actually a faith. This is the state church. And beyond the fireworks and beyond all of their movie magic, there is an esoteric aspect to NASA. And yesterday I likened it to an Egyptian mystery school. And that's what you would call it. If you just take the Egyptian mystery school or Mystery Babylon or Thelema and syncretize it with science fiction. In other words, put L. Ron Hubbard, science fiction writer, creator of Scientology, put him in a room with Aleister Crowley's American counterpart Jack Parsons, and then see what comes out of it. You'll get our modern space religion paradigm. And it's not only here, but the Russian rocket pioneers were all about cosmism, where they see space as this new heaven. Angle of elevation says sky vacuums are plausible, really? Question mark. I don't accept the idea that we don't have an answer, therefore we're going to supply something because the Bible says. Like, now, if you're trying to sell me on a dome without saying dome, no thanks. The dome has too many problems. If you're going to say there's a dome because you can't have a pressure system without a container, like I think you're advancing an argument that you can't substantiate. And if you're going to say there's a dome, where does it curve? How thick is it? What's beyond it? What's at the edge of the dome? What's outside of the dome? Because the domed flat earth is just the globe repackaged, subtracting space and replacing it with heaven and God. It's a non-explanation. It doesn't require any more transportation, any kind of exploration. You don't have to go anywhere. You just sit where you are. You don't have to change anything. You're just trying to change everybody's belief system and then turn science into the bad guy, make religion the good guy. And that's an issue here as well. The flat earth question was never an anti-scientific question. It was questioning if science has been compromised by special effects, by lies, which is a thing. That's why we say scientism with a capital S. It becomes a belief system. But the question is simply saying, can we trust these guys? And if not, what is the uh, position that you can take without having to make any kind of a leap of faith? And my position is a shape agnosticism for sure. As far as positing a dome or creating any kind of a model, I'm like, no, debating models is one of the ways they've held this whole thing up. You have ball debating flat and model versus model. It's belief system versus belief system. And neither of them, I don't think, have a tangible foothold in objective reality. They're both coming from the same place. One is processing your perceptions through a screen, going with what they say, and the other is processing it through a book and scripture and going with what it says. It's the trad and then the progressive utopian uh, scientism future, traditional versus future. MAGA, trad right, progressive utopianism, transhumanism. Two different operating systems. One comes from the old books, one comes from the screen. They're just updating everything. The new world order is the old world order with the new paint job. Diana South says all Space Force personnel are known as guardians. Yeah, imagine becoming a Space Force member, cadet, you're a space cadet, and you find out that you're just going to be sitting at a desk, like at a cubicle. And Space Force controls all the military satellites. So think about that. Knowing that space is fake, that space has always been just a metaphor for inner space, our minds, that NASA is not there to take you to some distant Disneyland on a distant planet, but instead it's to wage worldview warfare on you. And it's not just about space. Their purview is everything from assassinations to school shootings to space. I think NASA could be described as the space program in general. The is really just worldview warfare. And of course, one of the reasons I go with this, and I've described it this way, is that you can find the signatures of the metascriptors in these various operations. It's widely known that Stanley Kubrick's work includes Apollo 11 and its reference in The Shining, for example. Well, the same movie references JFK, 9/11. And so when you look at the big picture here, the space program has always been about inner space. And the same goes for, and I've been pointing this out recently, why Elon Musk, who's huge in the space program, is being blamed for polluting low Earth orbit with space junk. I'm surprised they didn't blame that piece of space junk that fell on that guy in Florida on him. But they also say that he is causing the mind junk problem on X. So mind junk, space junk, richest man in the world, inner space, outer space. These are deliberate conflations. They connect these things on purpose. These are parallel stories. Problem, reaction, solution. One guy gets too rich, too influential, he can poison everybody's minds and he can lock us down on Earth forever. We cannot let one individual accrue so much power. They're making an example. He's a fall guy. Photo Forensic says, I'm back. Aren't you excited? Yes, we are. Iron FE says, maybe those sun-worshipping men, when they dreamed up the globe Earth belief, gave the sun the Earth size to transfer the glory of size to the sun, flat Earth diameter, 864,000 miles, not the sun. Like an inversion, total inversion. Makes sense. Makes sense. Look, I've made this correlation between the Kabbalistic tree of life and the solar system, with the central light source, so the light source being essentially God. But that space travel is allegory for ascending to higher states of consciousness. Like, I really think that's what it is. I think that Nasatology is a religion, and it's not about taking you to some distant paradise. But I'm wondering, how much can they fake? Between Hyperloop and Disneyland like enclosures where everybody's dressed like they're on Mars, like, I think they could kind of fake people into believing that they're going through a wormhole and waking up on Mars and they're deep beneath China now farming potatoes possibly, but that they would have no idea. I mean, I don't know if we're that bad yet, It's either they're going to be able to brainwash us en masse and make that happen, space migration, or they're going to do it with a small group and just continue the charade like they have been. But again, about the sun worshiping thing, I want to point this out. I would count, I mean, whatever you think about the shape of the world, I would say that the modern paradigm, scientism, is in fact it is a repackaging of sun worship under a different name. I would count it as just an extension of it. I mentioned Richard Dawkins yesterday, how he's a faux atheist. Their God construct is actually an equivalent. It's syncretism. Gaia is God. COVID is probably the devil. Virus is sin. Global warming, the flood, Noah's flood has been repackaged with climate change eschatology. None of this is new. Space is heaven, and everything we see on TV is also a merging of the pagan and the new age stuff with our secular, with our quote real news. So it's layered, like all the movies, multiple layers, exoteric, esoteric, depending on how much attention you're paying. But even if you're not paying attention, you're still getting every layer of meaning downloaded into your psyche. Just so you know. You know, if you're not paying attention, if you're not actively skeptical, you are an open portal to whatever they want to download into your subconscious. You're just like, yeah, download it. Like you have to inoculate yourself against the mind war. It's not about the big events and I got to see through 9/11 and I got to see through this and no, it's not like 5 or 6 or even 100 events. It's the big picture. Truthers are obsessed with all these different events, but that's selective skepticism. They haven't taken the paradigm leap of stepping outside of the box entirely. We have a privileged perspective. You're not supposed to be here unless you're high up on the Illuminati pyramids of security clearances and secret societies and need to know compartments. How did we get here? Well, we saw through some glitches, we extrapolated, and we did a lot of crowdsourced, human intelligence research, asking questions and thinking. But it doesn't mean that we've replaced everything we've debunked with the truth. That's pretty much not true at all. In fact, we find explanations that are false, and oftentimes we're left with no explanation. So what you do is you put up a question mark right there, and we're like the Riddler, questions everywhere. But that raises red flags because you're not supposed to have any questions. You're supposed to be satisfied with the answers that you have been given. And I contend this is, and I, before the Batman movie came out, I said that they're going to kick down your doors, the UN troops, and they're going to rip the question marks off your keyboards because you shouldn't have any questions. Big Brother, I'm sorry, Google, the internet, it's going to tell you what you need to know. Approved sources only. You shouldn't need to ask. And when the new Batman movie came out and the bad guy was the Riddler, I thought it makes sense. They want to demonize the people asking questions. Angle of elevation says NASA says pressure needs a container, not fluorophores. Yeah, you're indirectly trying to make an argument for a dome, therefore limitations on the size of the world. You're implying a model. You're implying it's a disparate object, possibly floating in space. I mean, you don't know because you're automatically ruling out the idea of this possibly being the bottom and maybe it's infinite because you are prescribing a boundary. The dome explanation artificially limits the conversation. It's premature to assume a dome. And I don't know why domers do it. But they won't even say dome. They'll just say, oh, so you're saying you can have something without a container. No, I didn't infer dome, angle of elevation. You are inferring a dome. You're saying that there's a dome and NASA's own science would support this. You're saying it without saying it. You're indirectly implying that we live underneath a dome. And if we are under a dome, I just want you to tell me what's the curve of the dome? Is it higher in the middle? Phones are open. If you didn't try to convince me there's a dome without saying dome, you can call in and tell us what you think there is. I'm suggesting flat sky, flat earth. I don't know how high. I don't have the I don't have a model at this point. But I'm not going to reference scripture. because that leads to a certain paradigm. And one of the problems with the Bible flat Earth is they say this is why they're hiding it, because they're hiding God. And I never like that explanation. Who's hiding God? Everywhere you go, they're trying to sell you on some belief system, and religion's just as popular as ever. Nobody's trying to hide or demystify God. We live in a very mystified society. There's no indication that God's on the way out or concepts of God. They're not trying to conceal it. And science, is not trying to, quote, hide God. It's the replacement faith. But what is the purpose to presenting us with a false model? Well, it would be likely limitations on time and space, or constraining your travel and constraining your frame of reference and making you think that the world's about to end. Like, I suggested this Plato's cave scenario of filtering us into these deep underground Mars bases where you're totally surrounded by screens and you have no contact with the real world. Like, that's kind of just one step deeper than we already are. Angle of elevation says, are you claiming a flat dome? No, I'm claiming agnosticism. I don't have enough information to say there's a curve, so I don't. You don't have enough information to say there's a dome, but you do. And your support for your dome is as weak as the curvert's support for their curve. So you have no business asserting a dome if you're going to deny them their curve. And domes are curved. So, and if you're going to say a container, okay, like I don't even agree with this argument. You have a fish aquarium. Does it need a lid? Like, I don't necessarily think it works that way. Iron FE says Earth not publicly known, not a spinning ball whirling through space vacuum, has to be something else. Well, if we rule out the dome and rule out the curve, what are we left with? It seems to me that we don't even have any reason to begin with the Earth as an object. Is it an object of any size, of any shape? Maybe we're at the bottom of the flat universe. And we are all flat universers. We're also flat solar system-ers, because the solar system is flat too. Galaxies are flat, but the universe is not a big ball. It's flat. Maybe we're at the bottom of it. I don't know. And they'll laugh and they'll say, what's at the edge of flat Earth? Well, what's at the edge of the universe? Whatever you think it is. We all have an I don't know point. We all reach a point where we don't know. And the difference is, some have been tricked into thinking they know a lot more than they do, when it's really just a subjective belief system that they can't even test. And I don't think there's any purpose to debating people anyway if they believe in the ball Earth, because to believe in that is to be in the box. It means that you're non-skeptical. Non-skeptical media is the norm. And if your worldview is informed by it, you're just not a skeptic. So why would you take a non-skeptic and present them with a position that requires them to take a skeptical view to even comprehend it? They look at the screen and they think it's scientific evidence. It doesn't have to go through any kind of deeper scrutiny. And that's just such a major blind spot. It constitutes a philosophical crisis. But nobody notices because we're all having the same one. Iron FE says, could be generated as needed even for each being. I like that idea too. There may be something to it. Like, I'm not convinced the universe exists until we experience it. And what I mean by that is, like, I don't think it's a static thing that is a certain, like, I think it tends to follow a certain, I guess you could say, it's in a certain track, it's going in a certain direction, and it's being steered. But I think that there may be some element here that suggests that it's not a static object coming to a gradual halt, but that it's something entirely different. But we're given a model that makes us think it's dead and meaningless, of course. Oswaldo says, why does there need to be a container? This is a Jedi mind trick. It's a loaded question. They bring up the container to get you to admit that you couldn't possibly have a atmosphere next to the vacuum of space. And they purposefully even misunderstand NASA's description of the way that we go from our atmosphere into space. to suggest that you couldn't have that without a boundary, that the vacuum would suck up the atmosphere. And they keep bringing this up so that you're therefore, and this is their loaded question, their loaded premise, therefore say, okay, there must be a dome. And the Bible says there's a dome, so there's a dome. They keep on stating this thing again and again. They've done it for years about you can't have a pressure system without a container. In other words, you can't have an atmosphere unless there's a dome with God sitting on top. And just say the whole thing. Just say you can't have it without God on top. But if you're going to say that, then you may as well say we're on the inside of a turtle. You know, the world turtle with the earth on top? That was misinformation. We're inside and we're looking up, and what contains the atmosphere is the inside of the turtle shell. So let's go ahead and just go with the agnosticism. We don't know because the liars who've given us a false model and terrible science fiction are holding the truth behind some kind of horrible blood oath. I mean, who do you have to ask? Or who knows? I don't know. I don't necessarily think that the astronauts who are performing these movies for NASA are fully apprised of everything, but they got to be the most in the know about fakery in general. Like they know all the mass bang bang events are fake. We have some pretty strong indications of this. The back screen, I mean, so the backstage, the green screened reality has this backstage where it's not just like liberals who do psyops to trick the right, it's both sides. And all of the nations who are part of the International Space Station are sharing the same special effects department. They're all backstage together. Oswaldo says there is no container, otherwise we'd suffocate from all the man-made smoke contained in the so-called dome. Here's the real thing. It's not about shape. It's about open or closed system. The globe is a closed system. No more land, scarcity. We're running out. The dome, closed system, nowhere to go. Has all the same problems as the globe does. These are closed systems. And I think it is the closed system, both the geographical and the mental one, which they give you with the media, it's the closed systems that give the controllers the power to control us en masse. In other words, our worldview and our physical world are controlled by the people who are able to define parameters where they don't objectively exist, but it's a matter of consensus agreement. And I'm saying that the domers are in agreement with the gloobers. It's the same cult, basically. It's a cult of restriction, limitation, and a model itself. And I'm suggesting that it's premature to establish a model and then adhere to it. I've said this before, you wouldn't bring a Bible to a debate about climate change because we're trying to stick to objective facts. Why are you bringing a Bible or a biblical model to a conversation about the shape of the world when we're trying to arrive at some kind of objective understanding of things? Iron FE says FTFE makes stuff up as needed and lies about the rest. Now, Fight the Flat Earth fell for my April Fool's Day prank. I told him that NASA never lies and it was wrong for me to ever question them. But whatever the case is, he believes all the news. There's no purpose to debating him because, again, it's not about the shape of the world. It's about the open or closed system. And if you're in the closed system, you're only going to get information that confirms it. So he's just confirming the bias of his own paradigm, and that's all he can do because he doesn't see from outside of it, doesn't question it. Mind control is the principal thing. It really is about closed or open systems, and as long as you're in the MSM box, you're in a closed system. A closed system of ideas, meaning in this worldview, I don't entertain the existence of actors in the news or fake events or any kind of hyperstitions. No, I just believe it all. I think it's real. Nothing's fake. You see, that's a closed system of ideas. That's a closed mind. If you stepped outside of the screen and you recognize, hey, maybe everything I've been told is a lie, and everything I've been told by truthers is also lies, you're left in a place of uncertainty in the sense that, well, rather, you're left with a lot of questions, but paradoxically, you have more certainty. You know what you know, and you're aware of what you don't know. And you know that what these people know is BS. So at least you have a clue. And we have clues, and we have question marks that I consider to be clues. These are indicators that something is being covered up by a false explanation. Here for now says, I think there's more land. I have many reasons for thinking so. And I say infinite until proven otherwise. I don't posit that it's an infinite plane necessarily. The concept itself, they'll laugh at it. The glurfs, they'll say infinite plane, LOL. And I'm like, oh, what is space? Infinite? Yeah, infinite, expanding. What shape is it? Oh, flat. So you're saying space is a flat, infinite place, plane, possibly, and that's not funny. You see what I mean? Their laughter comes from just kind of a knee-jerk reaction to anybody. And look, it's not anybody contradicting what they've been told, but look, it's not skepticism to be debating against the flat Earth question. The flat Earth question is the skepticism. The people who are challenging that are actually defending the dominant paradigm. It's fascinating, and they are really defensive about it. They don't argue fair. They don't include the existence of movie magic. It's not even allowed. Like you can't even include this as part of the debate. I've listened to these debates recently with Fight the Flat Earth, and they'll they'll bring up 2015, 2016 era flat Earth memes and just use these as talking points. It's like if the Earth is spinning, how come I don't feel it? Like that doesn't take you anywhere. That's not a decent argument. But how about a conversation about mediation and media itself and the immersive illusion it creates and propaganda? And they don't even bring this into consideration. And so, like, what I'm saying is it's outside their purview. Mr. Trustworthy says the Blacks Are Indians cult referred to North America as Turtle Island. Their creation story titled it thus. Yeah, I've heard that recently was adopted by Ye. I remember Ye said, I can't be an anti Semite because blacks are the real Jews. And then he's like, blacks are the real Indians. So I'm like, are Indians the real Jews? I can't quite figure it out. It's like a chameleon. Echo Charlie says, Antarctica, the ice wall, could be a hint. Hinterlands. Antarctica, if the Earth is flat, could exist as described. But it's only, if you imagine the Earth like a clock, if it were to be flat, Antarctica would occupy like 4 o'clock to 6 o'clock. And the globe, therefore, doesn't actually provide an answer for what's for, 6 o'clock all the way back around to 4. In other words, are we surrounded by many Antarcticas? How does that work? And we would know if the domers would have started an expedition and just walked in a straight line the opposite of north. Just go 180 degrees in the North Pole and just keep going and don't stop. And they didn't even get out of their conference rooms. They became conference earthers. They decided that instead of discovering if they're right or not, they would just agree that they're right and build the pool of people who are in total agreement with them. Angled Elevation says, did you know that in the heliosolar system model they have a dome? It's called heliosphere, superhot plasma or wall of fire. Fascinating. As opposed to the flat earth model that claims it's ice. I have not heard of that wall of fire, although I did hear something about the first Roman geographer claimed that you couldn't go past the equator because it would be too hot, and that it was a wall of fire, essentially. So I thought that's kind of interesting. You could limit people with the notion that there's a wall of fire. And then eventually we get past that and they say, oh, now it's a wall of ice. Well, which is it? The ice wall is in your mind. Elephant Test says, Tim, you should learn how to astral project so you can see for yourself. I've listened to a lot of people who've taken drugs like acid or ayahuasca or mushrooms, and they claim that they have ascended, that they have seen the earth from space, and it's a ball. And I'm like, why are all these psychedelic experiences conforming the ball? You would think that if people were getting out of their bodies, they would see something else. Now, I'm not an astral traveler, but I've read books on astral travel, and I know that the Lemite cult believe that they astral travel, and they call it the astral plane. I've read Aleister Crowley's writings on it. It's not the astral sphere or celestial sphere. They call it the astral plane, which is kind of interesting, but I haven't been there. Has anybody here been to the astral plane? Oswaldo says we should test the vibes of cosmos theory. I agree. And I think I know where the starting point would be. There's a couple of points on the map where it suggests there's a landmass that's not on the globe. That doesn't necessarily debunk his model. It suggests that we have an incomplete model inside and out. In other words, they're not just hiding land outside of the globe's area that it covers, but they're hiding land within the interior. In the uncharted waters, there's other land, as evidenced by this moon map. That's where I would check. Elephant Tusk says, I have astral projected, but I haven't escaped this mirrored plane. I haven't seen any remote viewers or astral projectors come back with anything tangible that we can use. But I'll keep my mind open to that. Sure. I'm curious, but I'm just saying most of the people who've done the drug trips report a ball. But I think it's based on your expectations. I made this tweet today. If you look at the picture, it's AI generated. It has these individuals in battle fatigues with binoculars looking at the chemtrails, and it says, let's give a nod of appreciation to all those militant chemtrail believers keeping us up to date with the war in the skies. I guess I was getting a little sarcastic, and I was suggesting that they're doing a tremendous public service, that the chemtrail watchers are more important than the Air Force keeping us safe. Because at what point are we just going to call this out as just ridiculous? This endless paranoia, and it is militant. And I brought this up today because of Tim Pool, of all people. I don't know if any of you kept up with what Tim Pool did today, but he went against the grain, trolling chemtrail believers. So he wrote a response to a tweet by someone who goes by Catturd. Ridiculous. I don't want to say his name right. I hate his name. I hate his logo. The cat guy. So the cat guy posts a tweet, and he says, I got out to walk my dogs around the ranch, and as you can see here, the blue sky I thought it was going to be turned into airplanes crisscrossing the sky. I saw chemtrails in real time. The sky became overcast. It became this fake, milky, murky sky. Excuse me. I took a picture. It's not a conspiracy theory. So if you look at this picture, it does, as he described it, it looks milky and white. These are obviously from condensation trails. But he has 2.4 million followers. I'm like, 2.4 million followers, all being told that chemtrails are real. And this is one of these alt-right influencers. And my point being, all of these characters are uniform in this. Just like the left is always mad about climate change, the right is always mad about these so-called chemtrails. And I refuse to be mad about them. I don't have evidence to support this stuff. My point being, I decided that this would be the issue that helps me quarantine an off-world stage group, the Parallel Media, from Trutherville. There are chemtrails over Trutherville. Anyway, Tim Pool said this thing here. He said, I worked at the airlines. We had a hose for pumping chemicals into jets. I personally pumped hydroxyl acid into jets, and we all knew exactly what we were doing. The trails that Catturd sees are hydroxyl acid vapors coming out of the backs of jets. So Tim Pool comes out and he says that he worked for the airlines and he put this toxic poison, this acid into these jets. This stuff that could kill you, in other words. That's what he means by what I mean by he's suggesting it's poisonous. In fact, he went on to say hydroxyl acid is dangerous. It's found in cancer. It can eat through metal, and if you inhale it, you can die. So the chemtrail believers are running amok in Tim Pool's X feed because they found out that, yeah, he's part of the problem. He was actually filling up the planes with this poison. Well, it turns out hydroxyl acid is just water. And if you consider water an acid, which in some ways it is, it's an acid and a base. So therefore, he's trolling these millions of chemtrail believers. Tim Pool is trolling them. And I'm wondering, why is this? Why is he trolling them on this issue, which has been kind of a sacred cow issue for the right for such a long time? One of the biggest psyops used to corral truthers into Trutherville itself, which is a huge limited hangout. But I'm just saying, why is he doing a 180 on it? On this right wing climate change? Very interesting timing, because I have made this the key issue in separating the Trutherville gate kept sheep from the off world stage. Lean Dion says, arrest Tim Pool. Yep, I would support that hashtag. Iron FE says, there were chemtrails on 9/11 after the planes were grounded, making a checkerboard pattern. Really? Do you have any evidence of this? That there were chemtrails after 9/11, after the planes were grounded? Because after the planes were grounded, there were a lot of studies that were done that claimed that the temperatures went up because there weren't any kind of condensation trails. I never really believed that. But if you're positing that the trails are being left by something other than planes, that's a classic trutherism. You're like, oh, look, the commercial airlines are leaving these trails, and you point to those all day long. And then we say, there's no way that these commercial airlines are doing this. This would be a war crime. And then you do this little moving of the goalposts. You're like, oh, no, no, it's the secret planes that you don't see. And they're doing checkerboards. Well, there are checkerboard patterns, I guess, for a few reasons, but I'm just saying, stick to your story. Either it's Delta Airlines dumping toxins on our heads, or it's secret invisible jets that nobody sees. It can't be both. It can't be these and also stratospheric aerosol injections. I mean, you have to pick one and stick to it. It's it's very difficult to have an intelligent debate about condensation chemtrails because the chemtrail believer can just change it. And then once you totally debunk him, he'll say, "Oh, I meant geoengineering." I'm like, "Well, geoengineering is climate change mitigation. That's all it is." But anyway, we're dealing with this issue because it is only something that you can advocate for if you're willing to allow for certain logical fallacies. And we're trying to break apart from that. Oswaldo says maybe he's going with cloud seeding geoengineering psyop. Well, the whole thing is this. The chemtrail believers are a bunch of cowards and attention seekers. That's all. Because if somebody was, let's just say somebody was dumping cat litter in my backyard, I would call the cops. I would knock on their door. I would throw it back over. Nobody's dumping any kind of waste in my backyard. But then these individuals believe that the airlines are dumping toxins on them, and they can't do anything but tweet about it once in a while. They can't get together 20 to do a, I don't know, class action lawsuit. And they'll happily get on airplanes and fly to chemtrail conferences and talk about chemtrails. Meanwhile, they believe that they're on the craft that are actually poisoning the air. But it's an incoherent group of people with this vague paranoid suspicion that the government's doing something shady to the environment that will destroy the world if they don't warn us all about it and we're all going to die. I'm just saying it's just the same thing as climate angst, chemtrail angst. And the chemtrail angsty get mad at me frequently because I'm underreacting, because they're crying wolf, and I'm saying that's a fake issue. You're wasting your time on a fake issue that nobody cares about. And that is the case. It's a fake issue. It doesn't matter. It's not real. And it's part of a big tent limited hangout operation. And the purpose of it really is to get the alternate media to self-define itself by its paranoia about government, whereas the left is defined by its paranoia about free market. about capitalism. Convergence, solar eclipse, CERN, Lucifer, the Vatican, and reptilian venom peptides. This is on Alex Jones with the Health Ranger.
So CERN is firing this up during the eclipse. Like, what a strange coincidence. Why are they doing that? Well, guess what? CERN has traded scientists with the Vatican. And this is easy for any of you to find if you search for Vatican scientists, quantum gravity, and CERN. Okay, you're going to find press releases and announcements from years past where the Vatican scientists that were, again, specialists in quantum gravity, what is that, multi-dimensional gravitational effects, were swapped out with CERN, and so they were working together. And remember that the Vatican has this telescope called Lucifer, right? And CERN has the Shiva, goddess of death. There's the headline: Vatican, world's largest particle physics lab, plan to collaborate. That's the Vatican collaborating with CERN. Okay, why does this matter? Well, the Vatican now, you've probably all seen these pictures of this hall that at the Vatican, there's this giant hall that's built to look like a serpent. It's actually a reptilian hall. And if you guys
Okay, the reptilian hall at the Vatican, we've all seen that. But again, Vatican, CERN, Apocalypse, Doom, 4-9 coming up. Or not. Tennessee passes chemtrail bill banning airborne chemicals. Okay, again, you're being trolled. If you believe that airplanes are, quote, spraying, and think about the word spraying. In fact, let's look up the word spraying. What are they spraying? Like, let's say you see somebody smoking, and he is exhaling smoke into the air. And I look and I say, what is that guy spraying? Ugh. You'd say, well, he's not spraying anything. He's exhaling. So if I say, what is he spraying? And then you're like, I don't know. Some white stuff is spraying out of his mouth. What is he spraying? And we could talk about this guy who's spraying stuff. And it must be something that he's storing in his mouth. I mean, where do you get off calling something a spray without actually testing its qualities? Is it a spray? Is it technically a spray? Is it coming out like a spray? Applying a liquid to something in the form of a shower or tiny drops. Present. Yeah, this is, again, what we're talking about in chemtrails, for example. They say, what are they spraying? It's a loaded question. The question assumes there's something in the plane that is being, like, ejected. And that's different from exhaust. This is more akin to blowing smoke than spraying something, like a bug spray. So no, it's not a spray. The reason why it looks like a spray isn't anything more than the fact that the plane's moving. It's not spraying, like squirting something out. It's a column because the plane is moving. So what you're seeing is a column of hot air. That hot air is causing the condensation. You're looking at ice. And the reason for its shape is the wingtip vortices. Like, it's easy to explain. These things are predictable. Chemtrails are not. So you already lose your debate. You're being trolled if you believe that these are, quote, chemtrails. It's not a secret operation. That's BS and fantasy. That's deeper into the matrix. And there's a reason why you don't want to be in the matrix. I mean, maybe you do. But there's about half a dozen or more logical fallacies built into this that play upon your ignorance and adherence to ignorance, which is a huge problem. If you're going to insist that there is a spray and its chemicals, then at least you should do your due diligence and get up to speed on the condensation trail explanations, because that's what you're weighing your explanation against. It would be like bringing your flat earth proofs to the table without ever researching the globe's construct. So the argument from ignorance is a non-starter. But yes, Tennessee lawmakers passed a bill banning the release of chemical agents inspired by these chemical trail conspiracy theories. It says the bill forbids the intentional injection, release, or dispersion of chemicals into the air. It doesn't mention chemtrails, which chemical trails are believed by conspiracy theorists to be poisons spread by planes. It insists broadly here that they want to ban anything affecting temperatures or weather or affecting the intensity of sunlight. So they don't want climate change. Again, this is right-wing climate change. This Republican-sponsored bill was passed along party lines. Oh, party lines. You mean there's nobody on the left concerned about chemtrails? No, there isn't. Again, this is a bifurcated sidewar. If it's split down the middle, you can just dismiss it as anything more than a psyop. Reality isn't split down the middle like this. Reality isn't split on party lines. The psywar is the fake world view. And so again, this is just more indication that we are right here. The bill's backers were spurred on by a government report on solar geoengineering. Okay, now solar geoengineering is the idea of mitigating climate change. Now, do you believe in climate change? If not, then why do you believe in geoengineering? There are no plans, quote, to establish a comprehensive solar. There's no plan. This is the thing. They don't have a plan to even do this yet. The idea of cooling the planet by reflecting the sun doesn't exist yet. Witnesses who testified before the Tennessee legislature cited debunked conspiracy theories and speculated about secret government geoengineering programs. Again, climate change is a psyop to make right-wingers paranoid about secret government projects. Climate change is a conspiracy theory to make leftists paranoid about capitalism and free market. Now this is something from the Sierra Club. Scott Banbury, conservation director of the Sierra Club, an environmental organization, said, as a serious environmental organization, if what was in the bill was actually going on, we would be calling for it to stop, but it's not happening. Geoengineering is it's not a term used to describe a secret government project. It's basically environmentalists trying to fight what they claim to be climate change. Anyway, chemtrails is a separate pseudo-scientific idea that governments or corporations are spraying chemicals from planes to kill, control, and poison people. I would say it's not even a pseudo-scientific idea. It's an idea rooted in a refusal to look at facts. It's a superstition at this point. And I can point to things that indicate that even the best minds on it, like Crow 77777, the best minds on this topic, they've studied it for decades, are convinced that you can mitigate it by boiling vinegar in your front yard. I'm not in that camp. I'm not with the Ron Paul Love Revolution spraying vinegar at the clouds or at the chemtrails in like 2012. This is not new. This is just as bad as climate hysteria. So what do we have here? There's a Harvard engineering group who said that the common proof is that, quote, aircraft contrails look different, but there's no comparative analysis. This is as convincing as saying that alien beings walk among us disguised as people, because some people act strangely. Right. I would say this is a fake story. Rather, it's a meaningless bill. It says here the legislation sponsor, Monty Frintz, called it a common sense thing to do, although several lawmakers said it was like, oh, that's interesting. This amendment would make sure we're protecting Yetis or Sasquatch or Bigfoot from what this is what he's comparing it to. It's not to be taken seriously. Like you could pass a bill to protect Bigfoot if you wanted to. Does it make Bigfoot real? Does this bill make contrails real? No. But you know how many people are going to say, "Oh, take that." Of course they're real because they passed a bill. Now, what is the agenda? Isabel N says, I didn't say I believed it. I'm curious on what the agenda is. Yeah, the agenda is this. They need the left and they need the right in total agreement that man is screwing up the weather and is in need of further regulation. They need you to believe in the premise of anthropogenic climate change. Not that it's a natural cycle, but that man is doing it. That we are climate change accelerationists in the West because of our lifestyles. So, in other words, if you accept the premise of chemtrails or climate change, you're basically saying, screw your freedoms, like the Terminator. Your freedoms are ruining the world. And you're saying this whether you're a woker, a normie, or someone in Trutherville. And the only people who are pushing against skyphobia and this doomsdayism and this superstition, hyperstition about the sky falling, The only pushback is coming from auto hoaxers who have stepped beyond Trutherville and one of their orthodoxies. And this one's big. I caught flack from the Manduzled, but for the most part, that has subsided. But for some reason, this one's really touchy. It really is. And I think it's very difficult for people to admit when they're wrong. And I'm happy to admit when I'm wrong. You know, if you could bottle some chemtrail for me, I would drink it in front of everybody to prove to you that I think it's simply water. Iron FE says from a few years ago, President Obama, a new executive order authorizes feds to conduct mass behavioral experiments on citizens. As far as I know, this has not been rescinded. Sure, but I want to point out the mind war is not partisan. It's not the left, it's not the commies, it's not the Obamas, it's the left and the right. It's a bifurcated war, and it's by design. It's certainly never meant to be reconciled, but it's a trick, or it's rather a misdirection to think that this is being done by George Soros or the media controlled by certain interests. No, it's not really like that because there's only one government, only one media, one worldview monopoly being exercised right now. And we're just scratching the surface. But what we've uncovered so far, even though we don't have all the answers, we have scrapped a lot of false explanations. So we can stop operating with the same set of presuppositions that the mainstream mediated minds have. Like, I'm under no expectation that man's about to populate the moon. Like, that's just not even in the realm of possibility. But I know they can probably fake it soon. I know that they can fake nukes, and I'm fine with them doing Seattle. If they want to nuke Seattle, I'm cool with it. No offense if you live in Seattle, because I know it's fake. And most of the people there will think it's real. I mean, what happens is the consensus will believe it and respond, and those who don't believe it will just be marginalized. As usual, non believers. And generally, religions have ways of dealing with non believers. But we live in a time where they only do character assassination and shadow banning. They're not quite ready to burn us at the stake yet. Okay, let's move on here. I brought this up because Tim Pool, and someone said, please leave my chemtrails alone. You're obsessed. I'm like, I'm not obsessed with any one issue. I am obsessed with quarantining against people who have been duped, who have been subject to sleight of mind and faulty causality and peer pressure, consensus, paranoia, etc. That's all. But the reason why I made an issue about this today is that Tim Pool made a big joke about it, responding to skyphobia. And this is a significant departure from the default position he's supposed to have. You know, these individuals aren't allowed to debunk things, they offer alternate explanations. I listened to one of their podcasts where the topic was climate change is real, but it's not caused by fossil fuels, it's caused by uh, something about solar flares. And so their conversation is really about how, yeah, it is happening, but it's not actually caused by what the left says. It's caused by um, something with the sun. And so, do solar cycles have something to do with it? And so they get into this place where they've accepted the premise and they're just arguing on the cause. Typical. Angst G says they want to give the moon its own time zone. Fake, fake. You know, we haven't even established that the moon is an object and landable as described, but we're going to go ahead and start building the architecture above. It's a simulation. We do live in a simulation. And the simulation is getting more intricate, and even though we may find it unreal and unbelievable, I think as we move forward in the future, the increasingly visually illiterate will fall for everything. Now, this is interesting. This is typical of what we see with hopium addicts. This is the grandson of John F. Kennedy. Okay, and this is typical of QAnon hopium addicts. So this grandson of JFK um, looks kind of like JFK Jr. Anyway, he's on Instagram and he is basically really getting down to some classical music. Let me just, and I'll give you some context for this. So here you have this Kennedy conducting in his car, classical music. And then someone next to it posts this music from Swan Lake, JFK Jr.'s nephew. Big things are coming. And this is suggesting that this is a hint for Q believers that JFK Jr. is coming back. So, anyway, they get all excited about this because he's listening to Swan Lake. And the next tweet, someone uncovers that on his Instagram, he's describing how Joe Biden is the best and most progressive president we've ever had.
And I have something to say. President John F. Kennedy is my grandfather, and his legacy is important. It's about a lot more than Camelot and conspiracy theories. It's about public service and courage. It's about civil rights, the Cuban Missile Crisis, and landing a man on the moon. Joe Biden shares my grandfather's vision for America, that we do things not because they are easy, but because they are hard. And he is in the middle of becoming the greatest progressive president we've ever had. Under Biden, we've added 13 million jobs. Unemployment is...
Anyway, he's gushing for Biden right here, and I'm just like, okay, the nonners were just praising him as some kind of Kennedy, Christ blood savior coming with JFK Jr. to save the world. And no, apparently this one has gone to the other side. They don't even do any research, but they worship the Kennedys. They worship anybody related to the Kennedys except for RFK, which is weird. Out of all the Kennedys, RFK's the one who has perpetuated the notion that JFK Jr. is coming back to save everybody. JFK Jr. is a no-show, and now weirdly they worship JFK, who is Trump in their perspective. It is terrible. I've been exploring that rabbit trail. I don't want to go too much further down it, but it's desperate. It just reeks of desperation. I saw one guy talking about how JFK took a bullet in the head for us. It's like, did JFK die for my sins? I didn't know that. Isabel Ann says, the latest fear insanity is the new disease X will be released over the eclipse path. Well, there was a movie that came out recently. What was it called? I didn't watch it, but it had to do with, it was on Netflix, where something comes into the eye and takes over people's bodies. I'll see if I can find it. Some kind of alien invasion thing. But we have a few examples where this is sort of a theme. For example, Nope, where if you look up, the alien will basically come down and devour you. It's just sort of, it beams you in to it. But the idea of looking up and like even an it, looking up into the lights. So this, don't look up. Nope. We get a lot of this imagery where looking up is somehow like associated with something ominous. And I've been thinking, yeah, interesting that they would combine that. And again, 4-9 is either going to be the end of the world or the end of a lot of internet prophets' grift. If we do this right. I mean, if we can put out a video specifically, these are the ones you should ban, and this is why. And this is how their arguments are formed. And my contention is that many of these prophets are using the Texas sharpshooter fallacy. Jake the A-hole says, I've never heard anyone praise Biden like that. Yeah, and it's a Kennedy. Yeah, was it called The Strain? Maybe it was The Strain. Yeah, this is the one. The imagery is pretty dark. Let me see if I can pull an image up. There's 4 seasons of it. Yeah, the eye. Maybe it wasn't The Strain. It was something else kind of like this one. They're all kind of the same. They all blend into one another. Isabel Ann says, 7 days after everyone gets sick, In 30 days, media takes notice, 90-day lockdowns. Is anybody here looking forward to the future lockdowns? Iron FE says 2017 821 the total eclipse sun. NASA got shadow size wrong. Next day said the moon must be smaller than we thought. Now they say sun size hard to determine April 8th, path of totality wrong, and they changed it. Well, this is it. We're 3 days away from the end or the beginning of the end, but I'm not going to accept beginning of the end. I specifically have someone tell me back in 2017 that the tribulations were starting. So if anything, that was the beginning of the end, and so the tribulation should be over. But no, I'm not accepting any more moving of the goalpost. And not that I'm impatient for an end, but I see this grift for what it is. It's a scam. And it's also, look, we talk about the globe versus flat, the open versus closed system. Well, any doomsday uh, conspiracy theory is automatically putting you in the end times. And the end times is sort of like scarcity of time combined with a crouch, a defensive crouch, because you're ready for this, for whatever's going to happen. But it's like it's exactly where they want you. They want you scared, thinking you're about to die. We're all going to die. Warn everybody. Warn your friends. And at this point, I almost welcome it. I'm like an apocalypse accelerationist. Like, let's go ahead and nuke Seattle. Let's bring out the Antichrist, Trump, and bring out Antifa, BLM, have them duke it out. Let's just get it over with. Anybody else here want to see how it ends? All right, let's move on. Look, everyone's going to be looking. Everywhere I go, I see the glasses for sale. Vision for the Blind says the coming solar eclipse, April 8th, will be 6 years, 6 months, 6 weeks, and 6 days from the last solar eclipse. So this is an example. Does this tell us anything? 6 years, 6 months, 6 weeks, 6 days. The Bible doesn't have anything about 6666. It's 3 sixes. So why is 4 sixes ominous? Now, let's just say we agree. Okay, 4 sixes is an ominous thing. Okay, well, this is 6 years, 6 months, and 6 weeks. Isn't that 6 years and 7 months and 2 weeks? You see how you can kind of massage that? Yeah, it's either 6, 7, 2, or 666. Let me just go ahead and fudge this and move this. Like, to me, this is not accuracy. This is not a prediction. And they'll say, oh, this is too exacting. God did this. No way man could have planned this. You could put your meta script to the side because this is a coincidence. This is a synchronicity. This is divine. No, this is you matching up something that you can match up, ignoring everything that does not match up, and then you draw a circle, you draw attention to that which did, and you say, look how accurate I was. Doesn't work that way. So exactly, is 7 months 2 weeks the right answer? No, you can change it apparently. Just like you can switch out, I didn't get the number I wanted. Let me try a different gematria calculator. Give me a break. Copaesthetic says, how wide is the path of totality? Wouldn't the shadow determine the size, whatever is eclipsing the sun? We're going to have all of our questions answered very soon. JK, oh, this is it. This is one of the accounts, and I'm sorry I'm here, but he's here. He just posted. This is JFK fan 12345. He says, I accept JFK Sr. as our Savior, the second coming of Jesus Christ. I accept this is how it had to be. Most people hearing what I said believed, anyway, that I can't even, not right now. He says, JFK Sr. is the second coming. He took a shot to the head for us, died for 4 days, and then came back to save humanity. So on November the 26th, he came back. I don't remember that part of the story. Gets even weirder. Again, I told you I've been doing some research. And you're going to find this hard to believe, and you should. But sadly, this guy has 17,000 subscribers. His new take on it is that the second coming, his name is Yeshua, and that he appeared as JFK. He's also Trump, but he also appeared as the Undertaker. If you look here, JFK Sr., Yeshua, has a square face, and then he has a picture of JFK next to a picture of the Undertaker. Like, so what are we dealing with here? Illness? Parody? Active measure? Some kind of operative? Is this just some crazy guy who thinks that JFK died for his sins? But my point being, this is one of the more popular things you see on Twitter. This is typical. Garbage like this, mind junk. 17,000 followers. How does this even happen? How did we get here? We got here because Trutherville has no standards. There's no skepticism. Mr. Trustworthy says the fourth X is silent. Yeah, yeah, that's just cheating at this point. And again, is 77777 a bad number? Oh, there's 8 months, 8 weeks, and 8 days. Ding, 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 we got a hit. Well, isn't 8 days another week? So wouldn't that be, I don't know, 9 weeks and a day? And they.
Thank you, Multichero Dagger. The IPS appreciates the support.
Yeah, thank you very much, Multi-C Zero Dagger. And we do appreciate the support, and we have big plans. We're trying to make things fun. I mean, it's intriguing, it's entertaining, it is conspirataining. And I'm not really ashamed to say it is conspirataining. I'm not scared. I'm not running for the hills. I'm not worried about nukes. I really am the opposite of apathetic. I actually do care. I'm very empathetic. However, I'm not triggered by superstitious nonsense. Like like some of us here are experiencing what could be termed a neo-enlightenment. And that's because we are something of a revolt. It's an intellectual revolt against the mind war, against the obvious fakery that we see through. We don't have to act as though we believe it. Think about those who escape theocratic societies and they recognize there's another way to look at the world. You don't have to continue to be shackled by what the low information believers are shackled with. All right, let's continue here. I'm going to be watching the eclipse. I'll be live streaming during the eclipse. And I'll try to stay out of the JFK rabbit trails, but I just like to point out the full spectrum of where we're at. And the left is crazy, the right is crazy, the fringes are crazier. And it's not getting any saner. People aren't waking up. There's this mantra I hear among truthers like, oh, well, people are waking up, people are getting it, I'm planting seeds. Like, no, they're not. And most of the people who say that are in no position to wake people up. They're experiencing an alternate version of the mainstream. They're having a nightmare. They think they're awake. No, you're just scared now. That's the only difference. The difference between a truther and a normie, the truthers are scared, and the normies are apathetic and comfortable, comfortably numb. And I don't have the agitation of the truther, which is why a lot of them are mad at me. There are certain things I just contest. Again, The Simpsons predicted the ISS would be destroyed by one of Elon's craft. Now that is totally on par. That is on script. That is exactly in keeping with what I thought they would do. And it's simply because Elon Musk represents capitalism in space. And they've made this point for some time that if we allow Blue Origin or any of these rich individuals to go mine space rocks, mine asteroids, they could become trillionaires. And what that will do is it will destabilize our world economies. We will have probably facilitated endless pollution and endless incentive to continue to exploit our limited resources. So, in other words, we cannot survive mining in space, bringing the wealth of heavens down to the earth. The collective can't survive. So, they have to make an example out of these billionaires. And I think this all ties in to the Tower of Babel falling, which is a reference to the West. Not a coincidence that Nimrod on the world stage is, I mean, if you look at Jeff Bezos, he is Nimrod. Like the character of Nimrod, the builder of the Tower of Babel, has been amalgamated onto Bezos. Richest man on earth. We've talked about the symbolism on this, and I'll do a separate video on these world stage characters so you see where we're coming from with this. But we've been prepared for some time for the next Titanic to sink, the next big example of the West falling, and I think the Titanic, the Twin Towers, and the space station falling are part of this contiguous operation of the Tower of Babel falling. That it's in the process of falling, and it's not quite done, but there are some hints and clues about around this where it's going, but I think that it has to be done because we can't go into space as capitalists. We have to go as communists, as the original rocket pioneers were all about space communism. Jake the A-hole says, I thought about driving out to Texas to cover it, but the cost of gas is so expensive and it's a ton of driving, so I'm going to pass. I'll be watching. I think I'm not sure the percentage I have, but I will be live streaming it for sure. Now, I am planning on doing a bit of driving here very soon. I have to go out to California next month for the pre-trial, the pre-hearing thing, pre-trial for Google. It's going to be at Redwood City. And one of the things I want to do whenever I get out there is arrange some type of a meetup. And even though I want to talk about auto hoaxology 101, the whole concept itself, it needs to be attached to specific things that I think are worthy of debate and should be debated, things that we can arrive at a clear understanding of through ruling out bad argumentation. Whatever our final conclusions, I think we can strip away bad arguments and get closer to something approximating objectivity. But I'll keep everyone posted on what we do first. One of my main targets is the ISS and has been for some time. All right, let's move. I watched the last eclipse, and I didn't have the glasses. I just had a piece of paper with holes cut in it, and then someone there handed me a pair, and it was the Ring of Fire. And when it was fully eclipsed, it was pretty surreal. I mean, I had the glasses on. It was like the only thing I could hear were dogs in the background barking all of a sudden, which they did, which is kind of interesting. But everything did kind of shut down for a minute, and this is going to be much bigger, I think. Everywhere I go, they're just aggressively promoting it. And the paranoia, the conspiracy theories, CERN, Satan, Lucifer, Disease X, it's all there. But Leave the World Behind did have some pretty clear indications of something regarding the X, which will be crossing over America. Okay, Ringer's back on if you want to call in. I think we got a voice message here.
It's either six.
Hi, I'm watching what says live on Rumble, your internet playing radio, and today's the 4th of April, and you had an article about John F. Kennedy Jr. I just want to let you know that I believe that I am friends with the original John F. Kennedy Jr., and that man that you had on there is not him. He's on TikTok, and he tells his story in a book called Stolen Identity, unveiling the real John F. Kennedy Jr.
Okay, I've heard of this. I have actually heard about this. Stolen identity. And this person just called a moment ago. There's another individual who claims to be the son of JFK. And he says JFK Jr. is not him. And here he is. Stolen identity, the real JFK Jr. Now, there's a number of JFK Jr. Contenders out there. Negative 48, JFK Jr. in a suit who died in a motorcycle accident recently, supposedly. Or he fake died so he can come back as his real self. Then you had 107 who would live stream just showing his cowboy boots. And then when, but I think they're doing it for the groupies. Infinite Plane Radio.
Hi, this is Lori.
Hey, yeah, I just got your message, and you brought up this character, and I heard about this once, who claims that he's the real JFK Jr.
Correct. The original, I'm hearing they're calling him the original John F. Kennedy Jr. And I've been friends with him on TikTok for a few months now. And I've read his book. It's an amazing story.
So what does he think is going on here? Is he being, or what was he separated at a young age? I mean, what's his backstory? I didn't quite, I haven't read the book.
Oh, good. You'd like to read the book, but I'll tell you what I can recall because it's been a few weeks since I read it. He was put into like a foster home, and he was taken back and forth around to different people. He was put into Hollywood. He's been in lots of TV shows that we've watched. Um, let's see, he at age 9 or 10, I can't remember. At age 9 or 10, you know how Jackie was married to Onassis?
Right.
Onassis was his stepfather, so he was, in that family. And George was like a stepbrother or something like that. I don't remember exactly how it happened. But this George guy, part of the whole system that they had going around this kid, stepped in and took over his identity. And they renamed the original John F. Kennedy Jr. They renamed him. They called him David Quigley, I think is what he was raised as. And in Hollywood, he was named, oh man, what was his name? Richard Steele.
Okay.
Boy, I'm remembering.
It says here, and this is from a Twitter account where they interview him, it says, replaced by a body double in a scheme to embezzle billions of Kennedy dollars for organized crime at the age of 9. The public persona
Yeah, no,
JFK Jr. was a counterfeit. Fascinating. Fascinating. Okay,
right.
so they killed the dad,
Yeah,
replace the son,
yeah,
take all the money.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah. That's his experience. And in his book, it talks about the things that he can remember. Um, he had this man who was in his life, in and out of his life, named Wayne, who was either protecting him, grooming him, taking care of him. He doesn't really know what role this man had, but he talks about Wayne, and he thought he was being groomed to run Atlantic City, but not as John F. Kennedy Jr., but as David Quigley.
Okay,
And
okay, okay. This is fast.
it's
This is, honestly, this is
it,
better than the JFK was Jesus story, honestly.
no, that's nothing. That guy, you said it. When I saw the number, I thought I'm going to call because I know for a fact the reason I believe this man is telling the truth is not just his book, but being friends with him on TikTok. He posts videos. He talks. He posts his own. He's in the camera speaking, and he posts videos and pictures of John F. Kennedy Jr. and him side by side. You know how people will split the face and put it side by side?
Yeah.
He's a spitting image of John F. Kennedy.
I was gonna
And
say that he actually looks like he could be related. I thought that was kind of weird. Just looking at his facial
yeah,
structure, I'm like, you know what? There is a resemblance there. Striking.
yeah, totally. And he shows all these pictures. He has hundreds of videos on well, they keep taking him down, but people are keep reposting. And and also, there's pictures of he's got family albums that he's shown. I've seen family albums, and the little boy that was John F. Kennedy Jr. He was a blonde, kind of knobby nose little boy, normal looking little boy. And his ears, they show pictures of his ears. Well, you know that our ears are a better fingerprint than our fingerprints are. And that little boy's ears match this man's ears exactly. He's got pictures side by side
Okay,
of his ears.
I've been onto this topic since 2019, and the JFK Jr. fakery has been one of my focuses for some time for a few
Yeah.
reasons. And so I have a particular interest in this. And
Yes.
I would be remiss if I didn't dig into this because this is definitely far more likely than the other story, which I've been looking at, which is obviously unbelievable. And
Yeah,
it's got to
your
be
story is
disinfo. Uh-huh.
it's totally off track, totally, especially when you said he looks like John F. Kennedy Jr. and he looks like that man on George, the George magazine guy. And that man was like in in John's family as like a stepbrother or something, Onassis is, yeah. And but you got to read the book. It's called Stolen Identity, The Real John. And honestly, I'm friends with him. Like, we chat in Telegram, in TikTok. Like, he and I, we have really short conversations, but I I would like you to see him and at least connect with him. He can't follow any more people because they've limited him to 10,000 people.
Okay. Well, you know what? I'm
I,
happy you called. Actually, you're the first caller from Rumble. We recently expanded to Rumble, and I'm glad I did. And no, this is new
yeah.
to me. I'm gonna look into it. I'm gonna get his book now, and then I'll reach out for an
Okay.
interview because I'm
Okay.
interested
Yeah.
in debunking this obvious disinformation campaign revolving around the
Yeah.
Kennedys. It's pretty bad. It's just so
Yeah. It is.
pervasive, and I'm like, I want to undo it,
And
and this may be a key here.
it is a big key. He wants the word to get out because it's not just his story. It's our nation's story because of how they've stolen so many identities. And he knows, even he'll talk about Donald Trump. I'm not going to I won't even tell you because I want it to be revealed to you in your own time. But another thing I believe about him is I'm old enough to remember when that happened, okay? When his father was killed. I remember hearing it on the radio when I was a young child. I was young, but I still remember it was like the first public thing I ever remember hearing. And then through the years, I would hear things about, well, whatever happened to John F. Kennedy Jr.? You know how he just disappeared for like 30 years or whatever. But over the years, I heard things about how the angels, what are they called? The Hell's Angels were taking care of him. You know what? That's a true thing. He was taken care of by the Hell's Angels. They protected him. They wouldn't let people harm him. And so when he came in, now you know what he has? He has a bike. He has a Harley, and he's really happy about it. He's a biker, and he wants to take his book to Washington, D.C. and put his book on his father's grave. That's his goal right now. And I'm supposed to help him, and I guess talking to you is one of the ways I'm helping him because I believe this man. I believe him. There's nothing weird. He shows all kinds of pictures, and you just got to connect.
Okay, I'll look
Really
into
easy.
it. David Keith Quigley, aka John
Well,
F.
David,
Kennedy.
yeah. Well, the book is called Stolen Identity. On TikTok, he goes by John F. Kennedy Jr. or John Fitzgerald Kennedy Jr.
This is incredible. If true, it's
Yeah,
incredible because the
yeah,
the stolen identity thing, the way it's been attached to this
yeah,
MAGA cultism,
Yeah.
It's fascinating what's going on here, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of content by this individual. So I look forward to checking out his book, Stolen Identity. I'll review his story. It says he was kidnapped, his family murdered, replaced with a double. Fascinating. Fascinating
Yes.
if it's true, and I'm willing to entertain at a minimum.
Exactly.
It's more likely than what we have been told. So thank you very much
Yeah.
for the call, and thank you for calling for or listening from Rumble. Again, you're the first
Yeah, I
caller from
like
there.
Rumble. I use it. Yes, thank you so much. I made a comment, so I'm the only one there. But thank you. I love your show.
Oh, well, we appreciate it, and you have a great evening. Thank you again. Bye.
You too.
All right, excellent caller, and I will 100% follow through with this because I've been making this a point of interest. I thought, let's just follow this JFK Jr. thing and see how deep this thing goes. Where does it lead? Because it's just at this point, there's a lot of grifters attached to it. There's the JFK magazine, and I recently published an article about this very subject. There's a individual who goes by the name Gene Ho. His name is Eugene Ho. He used to be a photographer for Donald Trump, and he tries to insinuate that he's friends with JFK Jr. and he opens up JFK Jr., not the real one that she's referring to, but the one we've been presented. He's rebooted that guy's magazine. Again, Eugene Ho, who's a QAnon cultist, grifter. And so all these people are feasting off of this fraud, whatever it is. But I did a story on him because he's a big believer in Prophet Kim Clement, who declared Trump would be the trumpet of God. And they're at the point now where they're having these conferences for George Magazine. And they have Pastor Bob Joyce, who they believe is Elvis Presley. So it's a carnival. And I just want to get to the truth of everything here, where you have a magazine purported to be JFK Jr.'s magazine targeting the youth with George Jr. magazine to get them to, I guess, follow Trump and Q. I mean, it's really there. It's really insane. It's out there. Mr. Trustworthy says, I'm a believer in JFK Jr. equals George Clooney. Hence George Magazine. Why else name it George? Their wives match up too. Interesting. JFK Jr. and George Clooney. I'll have to look at that. I just did a quick search and it's like, okay, a big rabbit hole just opened up in front of my feet. So I'll have to put that on hold. Mr. Trustworthy says Quigley equals Q. Yeah, I saw the Q and they're kind of like, uh-oh. Jake the A-hole says, I have a sub who told me that pastor guy is Elvis. I looked into it and he can sing good, but I don't think he's Elvis. I don't think he's Elvis either. And I think it's disingenuous to not be Elvis and to let people think you're Elvis and not tell them that you're not Elvis and to ride upon the speculation. This is what bothered me about 107 and negative 48. So negative 48, and I hope he's not really dead. I hope it was fake, but supposedly he died in a motorcycle race. Negative 48 was the one who came out with all the gematria and the numbers. And he said JFK Jr. is coming back to save us or something. But for the longest time, when before you saw what he looked like, you're like, oh, that could be JFK Jr. It sounds like him. And he was getting a lot of attention. And one night, someone invited me to this live stream on YouTube, and they're like, look, there's 10,000 people listening. It's JFK Jr. And this was in 2020. And all these people were thinking it was him. And nobody would ask directly, but it was just kind of assumed it was him. And he's reading these numbers off, and he's like, 174, JFK's coming back. 338, wake up, Trump. And it's just like rattling off these numbers and these statements, like 883, MAGA, from God. And I'm like, this is a weird cult. It's a gematria cult. This is gibberish. But it was JFK Jr., so I thought, okay, this is some kind of religious transcendent thing here where he's the second coming of Christ. These people were convinced of it. Well, finally, someone said, are you JFK Jr.? And he said, no. And his real name came out. And then he saw his picture, and he looks nothing like JFK. And this has been going on for some time. Remember Vincent Fuchsia? Vincent Fuchsia is like 5'4", curly hair and a mustache, kind of a diminutive little figure. And people are like, oh, that's JFK Jr. in a mask. and people would take pictures with him and do selfies with him, and they would share it. Hey, here's me with JFK Jr. And it's like this dude could not play JFK Jr. He could not even fit. Like he's too short. He's nothing even closely resembles the other guy. So I'm wondering, what are all these JFK Jr. impersonators doing? Is it for the groupies? And that's kind of what I thought. I think that's the case with Negative 48. I saw the way he had women following him around wearing JFK t-shirts out there in Dallas waiting for JFK to come back and visit the place where he was shot. Like, I think they're doing it for the groupies. Who wasn't JFK Jr.? Like, at that point, everybody was being accused of it. In fact, Vivek Ramaswamy was alleged to be JFK Jr. in a mask. Like, oh, this is how he's going to show up as Trump's vice president. They're going to bring out Vivek, and then he's going to rip the mask off. Like, when did all these people move into a cartoon like Scooby-Doo? Like, can we just stick to reality a little bit? No, we can't. Okay, let's continue. Lean Dion says, what happened to the Axel guy? Yeah, Axel was another JFK Jr. contender. Axel, I forgot about that guy. I had to block him so many times. And he would just do selfies. I've never seen a man do so many selfies. He's like, a selfie a day. No, this was like a selfie an hour for year after year after year. And sometimes he would just throw up comparisons like, yeah, I'm JFK. No, actually, I'm John McAfee. Like he's just constantly throwing it around. So again, John McAfee, right. No, I think it's just a guy really obsessed with his own reflection. It's just so bizarre. But Axel really creeped me out. And I used to just stare at his pictures because I just couldn't figure him out. Like, I don't know what it is. But here he is. Here's a few examples. Now, he doesn't say anything. He just does these selfies. Like, he's trying to communicate through his facial expressions. And I think the beard makes him seem like a wizard. And he calls himself a wizard. Maybe he is a wizard. But my point is, a lot of people thought this guy was JFK Jr. And I would ask him, hey, would you just deny it so people would stop piling in here? You know, you're clout chasing. You're getting fans and groupies under false pretenses. But no, he never let the cat out of the bag. He never admitted that he's just some guy who takes too many selfies. Eventually, he blocked me for criticizing his selfies, and somebody's like, if you don't think he's JFK, that's fine, but don't be mean about it. Just let the grifters grift. Grift and let grift. And right now, it's all engagement bait. And engagement has taken precedent over truth. So it's, if it leads, if it bleeds, it leads. That's usually the thing. They don't even care about quality. It's really about quantity of clicks. And I have to block so many people because I don't want to spend my time scrolling. My thumbs are getting sore just trying to get to relevant content with all these spam artists. Lean Dion says he's bewildering. He did some sort of countdown. Let me guess, it starts again. There's been a number of these false prophets. What about Greg Hellett? Do you remember the king? Do you remember that Corona was actually about the crowning of the new king? And Greg Hellett said he was king of the world. And he was endorsed by Trump. And a lot of people were following this guy who was believed to be the king. And then that didn't happen. Okay, let's move on. I'm just scrolling through my Twitter feed and trying to catch up on my notes from the last week. Vincent Kennedy. Now, this is someone who only has 400,000 subs because people think he's a Kennedy. It's like magic. He says, I don't want to alarm anyone. However, April 8th, they will attempt to open a portal to make contact during the eclipse. If you're looking for something to happen, you will be disappointed. If something does happen, you will be disappointed. For this event, let's collectively manifest a new beginning. Not one based on waiting, but on doing. So it's no longer trust the plan, it's be the plan. Okay, so take this opportunity of the eclipse to manifest what? Elephant Tusk says, Tim tries to be logical in an illogical world. Have you ever read the lyrics to the logical song? No, but we are living in Wonderland. Alice in Wonderland through the looking glass, through the screen. And it's belief systems versus belief systems, none of it rooted in objective reality. And it's filled with hyperstitions. A dark age disguised as basically the Jetsons. It's all high tech. We're improving. We know more than we've ever known. They're using our own hubris to blind us. Okay, let's scroll on here. We talked about the space junk that hit somebody's house. Again, space junk is one of these things that didn't exist, now it does. And here we go. They're going to blame, eventually it's going to be, I think it's Musk. Musk is going to be the main person responsible for space junking up our atmosphere. We already talked about Kenneth Copeland drinking blood. I think we're pretty much caught up on things on Clown World in the present state of things. We're just waiting for the nuke. Where is it going to be? Is it going to be Seattle? Is it going to be Gaza? Not quite sure, but it does seem like that the coming lockdowns are going to be the result of fallout. Iron FE says people got zoned out by TV. Now it's the net with information and misinformation. Well, it's the information age, and we're expected to think we know more and we're arriving at a better understanding of things. But remember what William Casey said, and he was the CIA director, about how we will know our job is complete when everything the American public believes is false. Or you had a statement by President Nixon about Americans won't believe anything until they've seen it on TV. Like, this is not hyperbole, it's not exaggeration. These remarks, however they're intended, they actually do state the explicit truth that our collective consensus agreed upon worldview is the one that has been processed through the screen, and there is a worldview monopoly being exercised through it. And it's beyond left right. It's really about the immersive illusion created by mediation writ large. Immersive illusion is key. And the maintainers of the immersive illusion, those who are apprised of how this thing works, they are what I would consider to be knowers, and those below them are believers. And so the information that they pump into this thing is to keep us in a state of believing whatever we can, whatever makes sense to us, but to prevent us from ever actually knowing. And they don't want you to know. They want you to trust the experts, trust the blue checks. But TV was just the beginning. The thing's going to get deeper too. Did you catch this latest report about how Facebook is alleged to have sold private messages? All of your private messages on Facebook have been sold to Netflix. So what does that mean? Well, it means that as they do their research to determine the type of program that they're going to need to propagandize you properly, now they have more specific information. They're really getting in your head to know how to better get into your head. Facebook let Netflix see user DMs to help them tailor content. Facebook let Netflix peek into user DMs, explosive court docs claim. And remember, you cannot separate Netflix from Edward Bernays and Sigmund Freud. I mean, they're blood relatives, but I'm not simply saying because they're blood relatives it matters, but it just seems like there's something in the family business there. There's something they got a corner on, and it has to do with mass mind control. I mean, that's the least of it.
Secret factors.
I'm talking about mind control, perception management, and also simply what I call creating what I call the massified mind. You see, the propaganda matrix wouldn't just work on anybody. If you just came from outside the system and you stepped in, it wouldn't work on you. Like if you never had any kind of religious upbringing and you attended a mass, it wouldn't do the same thing to you. You have to be raised in that religious faith to understand the full meaning of it and to be in that world. And, similarly, to be in the world, to be properly propagandized and to be properly terrorized by what's on the screen, to be properly influenced, you have to have what I call the massified mind. And that's what the programming is about. Like Truman in the Truman Show, going with the scripts, believing the lies, not questioning. The massified mind. The individuated mind is the mind that has stepped out of the box and has taken authority over their own mind and their own perceptions override the screen. The people who have put their head in the box have allowed the screen to override their individual perception. So do you have your own mind or are you plugged into the hive mind? That's really the question here. And it's pretty obvious. If you can be triggered by what's in the box, then you're being programmed. Because what is being played on the box, yeah, it may be real in the tangible sense, but it's also real in the reality TV sense, meaning it's fake. It's real fake. There's a merging of real and fake. And all we're doing here is we're making that distinction clearer. We're defining that distinction. And that's why I focus on certain issues, certain paradigm shaping issues, things that are like infrastructure to how this thing works. The doomsdays, the parameters, the political divisions that go on multiple levels from the micro to the macrocosmic, where they're telling the same story but at different levels. Your skin, your border, the world, your mind space, outer space. They're constantly doing this. But that's what we're doing. We're examining the architecture of the world stage. We're not participating in its antics at this level. And it's obviously, by design, it's a world of deception. And that caller was really fascinating. The call was interesting to me because we've been looking very closely at this particular deception, this strange cult that has emerged. And it just gets stranger. But as strange as this recent take on it, this possibility is, it makes more sense than what has been circulating for the last few years. Angst G says digital twin. I've been thinking about this digital twin. So they're reading your DMs. They know how you think, what you think, why you think it. They could create a complete facsimile of you, and you could be replaced. And if nobody leaves their basements, nobody leaves their home bunkers, nobody leaves their safe spaces, because we're entering the safe space age, you wouldn't know that your friends have all been replaced. You wouldn't know that many of the new friends you made never existed because they're all just chatbots. And look at the progression. Safe spaces to protect leftists from right-wing ideas on college campuses. Safe spaces. Physical spaces to protect you from mind viruses. Then you had social distancing and quarantining. Why? Physical safe spaces to protect you from viruses. So safe space to safe space, from the mental virus to the physical virus. But then, turns out, the physical virus is spread by people who have taken in certain mental viruses, which make them carriers. So now you need a physical, safe space from people who carry these mind viruses that also make them physically dangerous. So you see this as it moves forward, they set the precedent of safe spaces and they've evolved it, just like they're evolving quarantine. In fact, I had predicted that next we're going to have climate lockdowns. We already have climate lockdowns. People get warnings all the time. I've been getting messages from people like, oh yeah, my town is having a lockdown because it's windy, it's going to rain, schools are closing down. They're already doing it. It's just not everywhere at once. But we're in the safe space age, and it's about mental quarantine. It's never been about protecting you physically because they don't actually care about that. It's about the flow of ideas and their continued monopoly on world view. Mass media is the one world religion, and right now they're getting rid of Apocrypha, they're getting rid of heretics, and they're trying to criminalize blasphemy. But we're living through the process of this one world religion perfecting its quote Bible. Oswaldo says they're going to replace you with an avatar. I could be an avatar. I might have been replaced 2 years ago. The person who started the Infinite Plane Society channel may have been sent off to Terra Mar. I could be locked up in some dungeon in Epstein Island, and what you're interacting with now is some kind of digital double. I haven't been on video recently. Like, isn't that our standard anyway? Fake until proven real? At some point, fake until proven real is going to go beyond just news. It's going to have to go to people. Like, hey, you're fake until you prove yourself real, and being on the internet's not enough. Zoom is not enough. We've got to raise our standards. Iron FE says they want human robots that don't fight back or challenge authority. A mission accomplished decades ago. They've already accomplished that. We have already been robotized, and we don't fight back in the sense that we don't fight the authority because there is no way you can fight it. Like, resistance is quite literally futile. If you are resisting, you're actually part of the infrastructure that maintains your false world view. As a species, humanity has been conquered. Is it an alien on top of this thing? Is it the demiurge? Is it the devil? Is it God? Is it just a small cabal, a group of human beings who have figured out how to manipulate the masses? The light world order, whatever's at the top of it, is already established. It's already been built. It's already been perfected. We're just examining its architecture. Who's at the top? I don't know. But the fact of it is, the reason why nobody resists is that they're in this subjective world of belief. It's a closed system, and as long as they're inside of it, they're not in a position to challenge it. They can't see outside of it. Then there's us, but we're a very small us at the moment. Mr. Trustworthy says, digital twin, another reason to e-communicate with fake identities. Well, it's getting increasingly difficult. Lean Dion says Westworld. Yeah, Westworld. And if you look at Westworld, and I'd also compare this to, and I'll have to do a video on this because this is fascinating symbolism. In Westworld, they have this table. Here's a picture of it, where it's basically a map, a 3D map, a hologram, and it shows the stage where everybody is in Westworld. And from the outside, they can throw stuff into it, add elements, and then it appears in Westworld. This is very similar to something you see in the Hunger Games or Clash of the Titans, where the gods have this little arena with miniatures of the people they put on the stage. But this is how the world actually is, as far as the world stage, our internal construct. They have a model, they're outside of it. They insert stuff into it from the outside, and we believe it into existence. They take these superstitions, they take augmentations, and they become real. They're treated as real. We respond, and everything reacts to it as such. And we've already lived through many examples of what I'd call hyperstitions, contemporary myths, superstitions, etc. But this explains, or is a visual depiction of how it really is. And where we are is where the programmers are. Those of us who are looking at this thing from outside of the box are in a position that only those who have a part in the maintenance of this thing would have. This is a very limited perspective. We're a small group of people to have this view, and we didn't have to sign any NDAs to get here. This is a legitimate leak. But this is a really good example of the stage because what I'm trying to describe here is that our mental world is constrained by certain parameters. And it's established really by the premise that the screen is an authority. It's a window to the world. Whereas we recognize it as intrinsically a filter, a perspective, a limited perspective that represents the power elite's monopoly on world view formation. It's like a religious war. Like a religion has been imposed on mankind and we didn't notice because it disguised itself as many other things, including science. And I'm saying, I'm not against science. I'm just suggesting that under the guise of science and the authority that we afford to scientists, they have smuggled in a number of things that are more movie magic and ideology than strictly science. But my point being, these are just like the flat earth map. We don't have a map, But if you look at the flat Earth map as conceived by certain imaginative people, or misinterpreting or recontextualizing an equidistant azimuthal projection, at least you can see what it looks like from the outside. And then you can start thinking, oh, okay, if this, then what? But it's hard to conceive of a flat world, for example, if all you've ever seen is a globe. And so if you just look at this as a thought experiment, then you can see the utility in having a model just for thought experiments and trying to get more questions asked. What other questions are raised by this proposition? And when I talk about the box people are in, it's the world of ideas, and it's a closed system. Closed to ideas that contradict it, to ideas that suggest it's all fake, for example. So in their world, moon landings are real, world's heating up, school shooters are everywhere, etc. And whatever they want to insert into this, they have to prepare us for, and they do this with advertising, predictive programming, repetition, and at some point they can simulate something, and now it's in that world of ideas. So we live in Westworld. We live in the Hunger Games. We always have. We've always lived in a model, and it may not comport perfectly with the physical model, but at the points where we would notice a difference, I kind of think they have these areas covered. False explanations, their experts, controlled opposition. Joe Fior says, are we going deeper than usual today? Not really. I think we're just kind of here at the surface of the sea of irrelevance, rafting, just getting a kind of a big picture assessment of things. Trying to understand this. We're not fighting the info war because it's a big chess game, and you have these two sides. But we are actually, if anything, examining the game itself, not its sides. We're not on a team necessarily. I'm kind of looking at this as again, the big picture. Like, for example, history is essentially the same thing as mass media, just going back in time. And we know for a fact that all the fake news goes in the history books as though it's real, no matter what we say, no matter what we know. And that right there tells you that there's a split. There's a split between the televised world and the real thing, and the televised trumps the real thing. Their version is the one that goes down. It's the final version. His story, he is, Big Brother. And on an individual level, though, this is where I'm saying, on the collective level, the official history is going to be the official mainstream version always. But on the individual level, if you're allowing the screen to be an authority over your life, then you get amalgamated into that. But if you don't, if you don't relinquish the power of your own perception to the screen, and you say, well, okay, I perceive for myself, and the screen is an option, like another holy book, then yeah, your worldview, your perspective of things is going to run parallel. So what I'm suggesting here is that what we represent is something of a parallel media. We're not alternative, which is part of the mainstream. It's just the opposite. It's the antagonist. It's the left-right paradigm thing, but they're part of the same infrastructure. And we're not specifically engaged with it. We're kind of on the sides, recognizing that their version's going to stick, and they're going to get rid of all the competition, delete it, edit it out, and censor it. So we have a separate body here, a separate body of thinkers, separate records, separate accounts, separate research. We're arriving at different conclusions. So the best I can describe what we're doing here is we are amalgamating a group of people who are forming what I consider to be a parallel media. Angst G says, lies agreed upon. Yes, history is lies agreed upon. Media is the same, a mass delusion that we all agree upon. An agreed upon mass delusion. That's what they called it in Leave the World Behind. Okay, I'm out of time for tonight. We'll start earlier tomorrow. And I'll be in Discord here in a moment. I want to test out my new Bluetooth headphones. This is AutoHoax Chief Crow. Thanks to all the commenters, callers. I'll do some further research on the real JFK Jr. Will the real JFK Jr. please stand up? There are so many of them. We should just do one breakdown of every single contender, and then we'll We'll have a poll. Well, this is Auto Hoax. Have a good night.
I'm on Auto Hoax, and it feels so good. You just auto believe everything like I knew that you would. In my dream, you know I ain't got time, baby, for another crisis.